Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a successful real estate agent, and I've always been good at seeing value, not just in houses, but in relationships too. My husband, Tom, and I were lucky to inherit a beautiful vacation home by the lake. It was quiet, peaceful, and the perfect escape from busy city life and, to be honest, from my in-laws. Tom's parents never really warmed up to me. They came from a more traditional background and often made small, passive-aggressive comments about my career and my modest upbringing. A real estate agent, always trying to sell something, they'd joke, but I knew there was more to their words. This house wasn't just a building for us, it was our haven, where we shared laughter during family get-togethers and found peace on our own. But as Tom's parents got older, they started asking us to sign the house over to them. We need to make sure it stays in the family for future generations, they said one night at dinner. The room felt tense, and I could sense the pressure in the air. But it is staying in the family. Tom and I are your family, aren't we? I asked, trying to stay calm even though I was getting frustrated. Yes, Maria, but you know what we mean. It's about securing the family legacy, Tom's father replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. The tension was almost too much to bear. Tom, bless him, was torn. He wanted to make his parents happy, but he hated how it was affecting our marriage. We spent many nights talking about what to do, stress etched on both our faces. Why do they have to make everything about business? I asked him during one of those late-night talks. Tom sighed deeply, a sound that said more than words ever could. It's how they've always been, Maria. It's not just about the house, it's about control, he finally said, sadness in his eyes that matched my own. It wasn't just what they said, it was how they acted. Every time they visited the house, it felt like a game. They would drop hints about the future of the property. During one particularly blunt conversation, Tom's mom said, "You two don't need such a big place. Think about the family. Think about your brothers." Her words hurt. It wasn't just that she implied we didn't deserve the house. It was that she seemed to be saying we weren't enough of a family ourselves to keep it. That's not fair, I found myself saying. We love this home just as much as you do. Why isn't that enough? It was clear now that this wasn't just about a house. It was about respect, boundaries, and where family loyalty ends and personal independence begins. Look at this, David, I said, showing him emails between Tom and his parents. They'd been planning this for months, trying to pressure me into signing over the deed. You're kidding me, David replied, shocked. That's low, even for them. So, what's your plan? I don't know yet. I'm so angry, I can't even think straight, I admitted. Okay, let's not rush. There are ways to handle this, Maria, ways to make sure you stay in control. Have you thought about selling the house? Just end it all and sell it to someone else. Can I do that without Tom agreeing? I asked. If both your names are on the deed, you'd both need to sign off on a sale, but maybe it's time Tom realizes what his parents' manipulations are costing him. You think he'd go for it? It might be the wake-up call he needs. Otherwise, you'll keep being painted as the villain in their story. That evening, back at home, I couldn't shake the cold feeling of betrayal. It felt like it was seeping into our home, our supposed safe place. When Tom came home, I confronted him. You and your parents have been planning behind my back. How could you, Tom? It's not like that, Maria, he replied. They're just worried about the future, about stability. Stability or control? This is our home, Tom, our future. Why am I only hearing about this now? I was going to talk to you, I swear. They just have a way of pushing until I give in. And what if I don't give in, Tom? What then? Your parents gave me an ultimatum today. Sign over the house by the end of the month or face the consequences. What consequences? Tom asked, startled. I don't know, they didn't say, I replied. They didn't what, Tom? Are they threatening to cut us off? To come between us? I don't know, Maria, I just know they're serious. The next day, I met with David again, feeling the weight of the ultimatum pressing on me. Your in-laws are playing dirty, that's obvious. If you sell, you can avoid their threats altogether. Let's weigh the pros and cons. This is about more than just a property, this is about your independence. You're right, I sighed, but I hate that it's come to this. It feels like I'm being pushed out of my own life. That's why you need to take control again, David said. Maybe it's time to show Tom and his parents that you won't be bulldozed. That evening, Tom tried to patch things up, but the gap between us had grown, strained by the secrets and scheming. Maria, please, he said, let's just talk. We can find a way to make everyone happy. Can we, Tom? Because it seems like your parents' happiness comes at the cost of mine. It's not like that, he insisted. They just want what's best for all of us. And what about what I want? Doesn't that matter? I asked. You know it does, he said, frustrated, but they're my parents. We can't work something out like this, Tom. This is our life, not a business negotiation. I need to think about what's best for me too. Maybe David is right. Maybe selling the house is the only way to take back control. Sell? Maria, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious, Tom. I won't be backed into a corner, not by your parents, not by anyone. Maria, please. No, Tom, it's time I made a decision that's right for me, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to think about all my options and do what's best for me. I hope you can understand that. As Tom stood there, stunned, I felt a mix of fear and determination brewing inside me. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, I wasn't going to be anyone's pawn anymore. At the dining table, the air was thick with tension. We all knew why we were here. We all know the reason for this meeting. I began, looking around at everyone. The table had seen happier days, but today felt different. Tom looked anxious, his parents expectant. Before I could continue, Tom's father spoke up. Before we proceed, we want to make sure this transition goes smoothly for everyone. I nodded, placing the stack of papers in front of me. I've thought about this long and hard. This isn't just a transaction, this house is part of who we are. Exactly, Maria, his mother chimed in, a thin smile on her face. It's for the family, for the future of our grandchildren. I glanced at Tom, who was staring at the table. Tom, do you have anything you want to say before we continue? He shifted uncomfortably. I just want what's best for us, for our family. And what is best, Tom? I asked softly. He hesitated. I think keeping the house and the family is the right thing to do. It's what my parents want. Taking a deep breath, I leaned forward. Well, there's been a change of plans. Tom's father frowned. What are you talking about, Maria? The house, I said, my voice calm but firm. It's already been sold. The room fell into stunned silence. Tom's eyes snapped up to meet mine. Sold? His mother gasped. To whom? When? To a charitable organization. They plan to turn it into a retreat for underprivileged families, I said, sliding the proof of sale across the table. Tom's father's voice rose. How could you do this without telling us? I had my reasons, I replied firmly. This house was as much mine as it was Tom's. I couldn't let it be used as a tool for manipulation any longer. We never, his mother began, her face flushed. Please, I cut her off. I've seen the emails, the plans. I felt the pressure. This was the only way I knew to protect what was ours, what was mine. Tom looked torn, his voice pained. Maria, why didn't you talk to me about this? I wanted to, but every time we spoke, it felt like your parents' wishes came first. Just then, the doorbell rang. I stood to answer it, letting in Miss Johnson, the representative from the charity. She entered with a calm presence. Good afternoon. I'm here to discuss the future of the property, she said, extending her hand to Tom's parents. Tom murmured, still in shock. We had no idea it would come to this. Miss Johnson smiled warmly. We plan to honor the spirit of this home. Families in need will find peace here, just as you did. I hope you can see the good in that. Tom's mother looked between me and Miss Johnson, her sharp demeanor softening slightly. And our son, our family. I believe this is a new beginning for all of us, I replied, a mix of relief and defiance in my voice, one where we respect each other's decisions and boundaries. Tom stood and came to my side. I need to think about all this. Maria, can we talk? Of course, I said, hoping this crisis could finally begin to heal the rift between us. As Miss Johnson explained the charity's plans for the home, I caught Tom's eye. There was a flicker of understanding, maybe even gratitude. It felt like the first step toward healing. The meeting ended with promises to communicate better. While the reconciliation wasn't complete, the house felt lighter, its walls ready to embrace a new chapter. The echoes of that meeting stayed with me in the following weeks, a constant reminder of the seismic shift in our family dynamics. As I faced the backlash from Tom's parents and their circle, Tom became my greatest support. One evening, while we sat among boxes in the old vacation home, packing up memories, Tom broke the silence. This isn't just about the house anymore, is it? No, I replied, sealing another box with tape. It's about setting boundaries, Tom. It's about respect. Tom sighed, the weight of everything finally sinking in. You were right, Maria. My parents, they went too far. I see that now. The realization wasn't easy for Tom. His loyalty to his parents clashed with his love for me, but the support he showed by standing by my side through the storm marked the start of a new chapter for us. In the weeks that followed, Tom's parents had to face the consequences of their actions. Word of their scheming and the sale of the house became public, damaging their reputation. Humiliated by their own greed and the judgment of others, they were forced to retreat, dealing with their shame in private. As I look back on everything, the challenges we faced and the victories we achieved, I understand the importance of standing firm in one's values. Selling the vacation home, while filled with conflict, was necessary for us to reclaim our independence and redefine our lives on our own terms. Thank you for following my story. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't just about asserting your rights, but also about choosing your own path and valuing your self-worth. Here's to new beginnings and personal victories. How would you handle toxic family pressures while keeping your boundaries strong? Feel free to share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of life, struggle, and triumph.
Vincent was rushing around the office. Today was his and Darcy's anniversary, and they had been married for a year. It could have been the happiest year of his life, if not for one thing. There was one important secret he couldn't reveal to her. In fact, he had done an ugly thing by marrying her and hiding it. Vincent knew Darcy wanted to have children very much, and he was afraid that after finding out the truth, she would not want to live with him. He too wanted to have a son or daughter very much, but as the doctor had said, he could never be a father. Vincent sat down and picked up a red velvet box from the table. It was a wedding anniversary present for Darcy. He felt delight that he could afford to pamper the woman he loved with good jewellery. As he looked out the window, Vincent thoughtfully remembered how he had once sworn not to trust any woman again. Darcy was his second wife. His first wife was Caroline, whom he married when he was just starting his business. Caroline was bright, charming, and seemed perfect in every way. However, she cheated on him, and he only found out about it later, after Caroline gave birth to their long-awaited son. Something about the child alerted Vincent. He was happy, of course, but didn't understand how two brunettes could have such a blonde child. Vincent shared his doubts with his friend, the doctor, and 2 weeks later discovered that the baby was not his. This was so frustrating that the 30-year-old healthy man developed high blood pressure. His friend suggested a full medical checkup, and it was then relieved that Vincent could never be a father. The doctor suggested repeating the tests, but Vincent refused. It was a devastating emotional blow. But Vincent was distracted from his feelings of inferiority by the impending legal battle with Caroline over their property. In the end, Caroline did not receive a single penny. Shaking himself out of his reverie, Vincent stood up and headed home. Tonight he would confess everything to Darcy. If she did not want to stay with him without the children, he would not hold her back. He loved her so much that he would let her go for the sake of her natural desire to have children. Slipping the box into his pocket, Vincent left the office. It was a beautiful winter evening outside, and a sky filled with stars and the moon. For some reason, Vincent remembered how he and Darcy had first met. During his company's corporate party at a restaurant, Vincent noticed Darcy, who was the administrator there. He was immediately drawn to her, but thought she was too young for him. However, after drinking a little, he decided to try his luck and add her to his winning list. He thought he could do anything until that evening when he approached her and asked her to go out with him tonight. Darcy, who was about 10 years younger than him, slapped him across the face. Even the music in the restaurant died down, and everyone expected Vincent's explosive nature to take over. However, to everyone's surprise, he simply smiled. "Well, all right. But I'm not saying goodbye," he said. He returned to his table and watched her, for the rest of the evening. Meanwhile, his security service began gathering information about her. By the next day, Vincent already knew that the girl was not from the city, but from the countryside. She worked as an administrator and was a part-time student in the history department. In general, everything about her seemed positive, except for her financial situation. Vincent decided to focus on that. He had never seen a girl who could not be bought. However, his first attempt failed. He showed up at her door with a bouquet and an expensive bracelet. Another girl would have been over the moon with happiness, but Darcy calmly thanked him for the flowers, apologised for hitting him, and said, "And the bracelet, please take it back." "What do you mean? Do you have any idea how much it's worth?" Vincent asked. "I don't know, but it's probably a lot. That's why you should take it away. You and I barely know each other, and it's at least indecent and strange to give such gifts," Darcy replied. Vincent was so confused that he didn't know how to respond. He waited a few days and then invited her to the most expensive restaurant. However, Darcy again refused, saying that she had work and studies. Vincent became angry and asked, "Tell me, what do you want? I've stopped thinking about getting you into bed. Can we at least talk?" "We can talk, but remember that not everything in this world can be bought," she said with a smile. To be honest, he didn't have a clear idea of what it would be like, but he agreed nonetheless. Darcy invited him to a picnic, and he fried a kebab himself. Then the two of them fished together, although they argued more about how to do it properly. Nothing happened romantically between them that day, but when they parted, Vincent realised that he wanted to see her again. He tried to convince himself that she was just like everyone else for a few days, but then he gave up and went to see her again. Not because he wanted to sleep with her, but because he simply wanted to be around her. The wedding was unforgettable. Darcy was absolutely stunning, and Vincent couldn't keep his eyes off her. They had been inseparable for a year, and today marked their anniversary. Vincent parked in the courtyard and sat for a moment in the car, afraid that his happiness would disappear too quickly. As he walked inside, he saw the table was already set. Darcy rushed into his arms, overjoyed to see him. "I missed you so much," he exclaimed. Darcy greeted her husband with a smile. "I missed you more anyway." The man let out a sigh. "Why do you always argue with me?" Darcy chuckled and took her husband by the hand, leading him to the table. "Look what I have for you," Vincent said, presenting a velvet box. Darcy admired the jewellery. "It's so beautiful. Thank you. But I have a present for you as well. I promise you'll love it." Vincent looked at his wife with interest and asked, "What could surprise a man who practically has everything?" Darcy smiled affectionately and showed Vincent a pregnancy test with 2 bars. Suddenly, Vincent's expression changed and he stood up, went to the window and stared out into the darkness for a long time. "Aren't you glad?" a scared Darcy asked. Vincent turned sharply. "You have 15 minutes to pack your things and get out. Otherwise I can't be responsible for my actions. I thought you were different, but you're the same. Even worse." Darcy sobbed. "Vincent, what are you saying? We're going to have a baby. What are you so upset about? It's normal for a family to have children." Vincent was furious. "It's normal to have children with your husband, not with your lover." Darcy suddenly straightened up, stopped crying, looked at him carefully and said, "How wrong I was about you. I thought you were genuine, that you loved me, not your money." She turned and walked briskly into the bedroom. Vincent saw her take out a few things, some jeans and a sweater, and left all the expensive clothes and jewellery. As soon as the door closed behind her, Vincent sank into a chair and cried. He wanted to rush after her, to tell her that he loved her and would continue to love her, but he held back. Darcy had no right to betray him. The following morning he called a lawyer and quickly obtained a divorce. Afterwards, he withdrew into himself, throwing himself into his work. 20 years had passed. "Mr. Thompson, there are candidates here," reported the secretary. "Let the first person go in," Vincent said, looking away from the view outside the window. Vincent always personally approved the hiring of managers for his company. He now had to interview 2 candidates who had already passed through the HR department. He liked the first candidate and invited the second man to enter. "Hello, my name is Ian Thompson." A young man who looked just like Vincent's younger self stood before him. "What's your mother's name?" asked a shocked Vincent. Ian was surprised by the question, but answered that her name was Darcy. Upon hearing this, Vincent covered his face with his hands, realizing the mistake he had made. Ian watched the director in silence, not understanding what was happening, while Vincent was at a loss and didn't know what to do. This was the first time he had felt such confusion. "You're hired. Go to the personnel department," he finally said. 2 hours later, Vincent had Ian's address in his hands. He raced to the other side of the city, found the right house, parked and got out of the car. Suddenly, he felt a strange dizziness, but without paying attention to his condition, he walked over to the door and pressed the bell. Ian opened the door, and Darcy was standing in the hallway too. "Darcy, I'm sorry, but I've been told I can't have children," Vincent said. That was the last thing Vincent could say. He slid quietly down the wall to the floor. Darcy screamed, "Ian, call an ambulance!" The young man summoned the paramedics and waited for them, watching his mother, carefully unbuttoning his employer's collar and stroking his cheek. "Do you know him?" he asked. "It's your father, Ian," said Darcy. Ian leaned against the wall to avoid falling from shock. Vincent slowly regained consciousness, remembering what had happened. He opened his eyes and saw Connor, the same doctor who had told him about his infertility. "Connor, what are you doing here?" "You're no longer my friend. Go away." Immediately Darcy's face appeared next to Connor. She was smiling. "Vincent, don't be angry. Connor told me everything and apologized. Unfortunately, mistakes happen." Vincent was consumed with the desire to tear his friend apart, and he wished he had the strength to do so. But it's a mistake that lasted a lifetime, and I'm a complete fool. I've wasted so much time and didn't see my son grow up. I hurt you. Vincent felt a tear roll down his cheek. I never managed to love anyone. Only you were in my heart. Oh, what a fool I am. Ian appeared next to Darcy and looked at his father. Dad, don't worry. Your health is weak, but we'll still make up for it. Scott woke up with a heavy head. Oh, yes, they had had a good time yesterday. He and his friend Ron sat in a bar at first. Then they went to a nightclub. There were girls dancing and alcohol flowing. Then they left the club with the girls to ride around the city at night. But something went wrong. Specifically, the road was bad. Why was there a speed bump there? In short, something threw Scott's car. He literally lost control for a second. And then was the store with a huge glass showcase. Scott literally drove into this showcase. At first, he was even scared, the impact, the sound of broken glass, but then the fright went away. Ron laughed. The girls giggled because panties and bras were artistically arranged on the windshield. They ended up in an expensive lingerie boutique. Then the police arrived. Scott and his friends were taken to the police station. It's unknown how it would have ended if it weren't for his father. He was an important person in the city. The chief prosecutor, judge, and mayor were friends with him, and all because Mr. Brockett had the largest construction business in the city. In short, the father bailed out his son, but nagged him all the way, saying he was a drunk and a lazybones. "Dad, that's enough," Scott said with a stutter. "How much does that showcase cost?" Well, let's pay." "You're going to pay? Have you earned a single penny?" Mr. Brockett got angry. "You're almost 30 and you're still living off me. When are you going to show up at the office? Did I pay for you to study at the college for nothing?" "I'll show up." Scott nodded in agreement and yawned. His father realized that a serious conversation with his son would not work and let him sleep. The next evening, Scott finally came out of his room, rubbing his temples. Mr. Brockett had just returned from work. Seeing his son, he frowned. "Did you just wake up? Good job, Air." "Dad, forgive me," Scott said with remorse. "I won't do it again." The father smiled and sighed heavily. "Okay, I've paid for the showcase, the damages, and the car will be fixed in a couple of days." "That's great," Scott rejoiced. "Only you do not drive in the near future," added the father. "When you get a job, I'll see you in action, and then I'll decide whether to give you the keys or not." Now Scott sighed. Well, there's nothing he can do. He'll have to obey his father's will. Mr. Brockett raised his son alone from the age of 10, after his wife died from a serious illness. While he was at work, a governess and a housekeeper looked after his son. Mr. Brockett often stayed at work for days, leaving his son in the care of others. As his son entered adolescence, he became rude and insolent, but Mr. Brockett was too busy earning money to pay attention to him. Additionally, his personal life was quite active as well, with one mistress after another. Nonetheless, he always fulfilled his son's desires and believed that providing him with the best of everything was the most important thing. He assumed his son's character would improve with age. So Scott grew up. On his 18th birthday, Scott crashed the first car, which his father had given him. But Mr. Brockett soon bought him a new one. Scott even finished architectural college, but this did not make him any wiser. He preferred drinking, partying, and girls. Mr. Brockett repeatedly tried to involve Scott in his business, but he always found excuses not to work. Why bother? He had plenty of his father's money. But Mr. Brockett wanted to pass on his business to him. He believed that if he persisted in pulling Scott into business, soon he would become his right hand. After the incident with the lingerie store, Scott finally got a job, as promised to his father. He enjoyed the office, especially because there were many beautiful girls. Diane, his father's current mistress and the secretary, was particularly appealing to him. Scott wouldn't mind stealing her away from him. However, Diane was not foolish and knew who was in charge. She wouldn't leave Mr. Brockett for his spoiled son. One day, Scott entered his father's reception area, sat in a chair, put his feet on the table and stared at Diane, who was handling correspondence. He carefully studied the deep neckline of her blouse. "Listen, Diane, don't you want to have a glass of wine tonight, in a romantic setting?" he asked casually. "I don't want to," Diane smiled. "Aren't you afraid that I'll tell him that you're pestering me? Then you'll get out of here, and you'll go from being loved to being dumped," laughed Scott. "Don't forget I'm his only son, his hope and support." He wanted to say something else, but the door to the reception opened, and a pretty blonde girl in a cleaning lady's uniform peeked in. "Diane, I didn't water your flowers today. Can I do it now?" she asked. "Oh, let's do it later. I'm finishing my work now. I don't want to be distracted." Diane shook her head. "Okay, no problem." The girl smiled and disappeared behind the door. Scott looked at Diane in surprise. "I don't understand. Do we have a new cleaner? Where did that old lady go?" he asked Diane. "Helena got sick. Jody is here temporarily." "So her name is Jody," Scott said dreamily. Diane just sighed and wondered if Scott would finally leave her alone and focus on this girl. Why not? Jody is simple, clearly not smart. The rich guy will wink at her and Jody will melt. And she'll feel more comfortable finally. "She's a beautiful girl." Diane winked at Scott. "Go for it." "I'm not interested in cleaners," grinned Scott. But Jody had clearly caught his interest. That same day he called her to his cabinet. "Why is there dust on my windowsills?" he asked the girl sternly. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "That's impossible. I cleaned everything today." She then ran her finger along the windowsill, which was perfectly clean. "Really?" Scott said as if he was surprised, and after a pause he laughed. "Okay, Jody, relax. I just called you here because you're such a beautiful girl. I'm impressed. Maybe we can go out tonight. I know a great restaurant." "No, sorry," Jody replied dryly. "I have other things to do tonight." And she left the office. Scott just sneered contemptuously. How dare some cleaner refuse him? He'll have her in his bed in no time, just for the sport of it. In the following days he kept making suggestive comments to Jody and winking at her when they met, but she pretended not to notice this pampered son of a rich daddy. One day a funny incident occurred. Scott walked into his office and suddenly started yelling, and everyone rushed over. It turned out there was a small spider sitting on his chair. "Get rid of it right now," he shouted at Jody. "You've let dust with spiders in here." The girl immediately removed the spider and silently left the office. "Don't worry," Diane winked at her. "Scott is just terrified of spiders since childhood. That's why he freaked out." Jody smiled. He was so self-confident, but he was afraid of a spider. Scott did not calm down and continued to pursue Jody. Another day he sort of accidentally touched her on the bottom of her back. The girl turned around and slapped him hard in the face. Everyone in the office who saw it froze. "That's it," Diane thought. "We need to find another cleaner. He'll do everything to get rid of Jody." But Scott rubbed his cheek and whispered to Jody, "Big mistake. You'll regret it." Then he smiled and cheerfully addressed the stunned employees. "Why aren't we working? Everyone back to their places." "He's the owner's son. Therefore he has the right to give orders," he thought to himself smugly. Since that day he harboured anger towards Jody. Simply firing her was not in his plans. He thought about how to get revenge on the uncommunicative girl. Of course Mr. Brockett was not aware of his son's behaviour. He decided not to delve into it. His son went to work, and thank God. One day Jody was cleaning Mr. Brockett's office while he was away. It was already evening, and Diane was finishing up a document, rushing. Scott peeked into his father's office and saw Jody bent over, wiping the legs of the chairs. Scott assessed her from behind. Suddenly Diane called out to him, and hearing her voice, Jody turned around and blushed. It was Scott again. "Diane, you can go," Scott commanded, walked into the office and firmly closed the door behind him. He walked on the freshly cleaned floor and plopped into his father's chair, silently watching Jody. She kept working silently with the mop. "So, you don't like me?" Scott asked quietly, squinting and looking at the girl, and then his gaze slid to the side. There was a huge vase standing by the wall. His father had brought it several years ago at some auction in London. The vase was expensive. Scott approached it and turned to Jody. "Why aren't you talking? Don't you like me?" "No," she snapped. "Well, then don't get offended." He laughed. The next moment he took the vase in his hands and smashed it with all his might on the floor. The sound of glass ringing could be heard, and the shards scattered in different directions. "What have you done?" exclaimed Jody. But suddenly Scott blushed, even clenched his fists in anger, and yelled in a bad voice, "Why did you break the vase? Who asked you to touch it with your clumsy hands?" Jody, hearing this, even recoiled, then froze. She couldn't find words to say because of such blatant lies. Diane and a couple of other employees rushed into the office. Scott emotionally told them that the cleaning lady wiped the vase, then dropped it. "I asked her not to touch it. It cost millions," Scott said, choking with anger, "and this fool climbed with her rag." "Scott, you're lying." Suddenly Jody said clearly and loudly, "You broke it yourself in front of my eyes." "What?" Scott roared. "How dare you accuse me? Who are you? Call the police right now. Let them draw up a report on the damage. I saw her do it on purpose." But Diane convinced her not to involve the police in the matter. Let Mr. Brockett decide for himself. Soon he appeared in the office. Upon seeing the fragments of the vase, his hands trembled. "What is this?" he exclaimed. "I paid a tidy sum for the broken showcase of the store, and then a vase, which costs me as much as a new car?" Scott immediately told his version of events, and Jody tried in vain to convince the boss that she was not involved. "I believe my son," said Mr. Brockett dryly. "It's too late already. We will deal with everything tomorrow." At home, Scott stated that Jody was careless in her duties and that many in the office were talking about it. Mr. Brockett only shrugged and said that Jody had been looking like a responsible girl. "But is it necessary to punish her to teach others a lesson?" offered Scott vindictively. The next day Mr. Brockett called Jody into his office. "I don't know how it happened that you broke this vase, but you will have to compensate for its cost. Otherwise, I will report it to the police," said the boss. "It cost $2,000. "How much?" Jody turned pale. "But I'm not guilty. I didn't break it." "I've heard that already," Mr. Brockett interrupted her, "and that my son broke it. But Scott also said to me that you chased him the last days, and you were careless about your duties. Many say that." "That's not true," Jody cried. "I don't want to hear anything," said the boss. "Go! I give you a month to find the necessary amount, and you're fired." Shocked, Jody left the boss's cabinet. "What did he say?" Diane looked at her questioningly. "I owe money," Jody whispered, "for a vase that I didn't even touch. And also, Mr. Brockett said that many people were not satisfied with my work. Diane, are you too? Jody, I'm sorry, but here everyone is for themselves. The secretary lowered her eyes. Jody realized that she would not find the truth here. The girl left the office, sat on a bench and cried. Mr. Brockett is a good person, but why does he believe his scoundrel son? However, what else could it be? Blood is thicker than water. And everything had not been going well for her lately. Her mother is sick in a distant village, and there is not enough money all the time. Soon she will have to pay for her studies. She had thought she would save up the required amount with a part-time job, but now she even owed. The girl sighed heavily. What should she do now? For these rich people, 2,000 is not a large sum, but she understood why all this had happened. Scott just decided to destroy her because she refused him. Unfortunately, Mr. Brockett didn't want to listen. Jody walked along the sidewalk, lost in her thoughts. Hey, clumsy cleaner, she heard from the car that stopped next to her. Scott looked out of the window. Why are you so sad? Are you thinking about money? Jody didn't answer him and walked as if she didn't notice, while Scott drove slowly next to her. Clumsy girl, I can help, he shouted. Come to the hotel room tonight and we will make a deal. Suddenly, Jody stopped and looked closely at Scott. Make a deal? She asked thoughtfully. Exactly. Licking his lips, Scott said, and his eyes gleamed in anticipation of a close trophy. I'll be there, Jody suddenly agreed. What room and hotel? Scott said he was waiting for her at the Central Hotel in the city at 7 o'clock in the evening. Get ready, he winked at her. You will have to try hard to make up for your guilt. Jody shuddered with disgust inside, but smiled in response. Scott laughed and drove away in his expensive car. As Jody walked through the city, deep in thought, a plan ripened in her mind. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a knock on the door of the room where Scott had comfortably settled on the double bed. He lazily got up and went to the door, carelessly tying his robe. Ah, you're here, he drawled upon seeing Jody. Come in, undress. Why are you standing there for? Take off your skirt, your sweater, whatever else you've got on. Oh my God, how are you dressed? Where do they sell such rags? At the store, Jody calmly replied. Can I use the bathroom? I'll be quick. Well, go ahead, grumbled Scott. What's that bag you're carrying? In Jody's hands was a small travel bag. There's a surprise in there, the girl smiled. I promise you'll like it. Okay, go ahead, I'm waiting for you, smirked Scott. Jody emerged from the bathroom a couple of minutes later as promised. She held her hands behind her back. Scott was laying on the bed, his robe open. The girl blushed slightly at the sight of his naked body. He raised his eyebrows. Why are you still in your clothes? And what are you hiding behind your back? It's my surprise, Jody calmly replied. In the next second, the girl stretched her hands forward. In her palms sat a huge spider. Hairy, black, it was slightly moving its scary legs. What is this? Scott whispered, turning pale. Take it away. Fear paralyzed his hands and feet. Cold, sticky sweat appeared on his forehead. Yet Scott had been afraid of spiders since childhood. He had even undergone treatment for arachnophobia, but it didn't help much. Of course, dear, Jody smiled, but first you'll tell me everything on camera. What do I say? that you broke that vase and why you did it. Go to hell. Okay, I'll go, but that little one will stay here, said Jody, and carefully placed the spider on the bed. It quickly ran to Scott, who literally squealed in fear. Jody caught the spider. Speak, she demanded, pointing her phone camera at Scott and turning on the video recording. She held the spider in one hand, the phone in the other. Oh, please, tie your robe. Yes, yes. Scott obediently nodded, tying the belt of his robe and sitting down. It was me who had broken the vase in my father's office and then blamed it on Jody. And why? The girl prompted him. Because she refused me, Scott sobbed, glancing at the spider. Go on, demanded Jody. What do you mean? Isn't it clear? Tell me why you called me to the hotel, said the girl, and brought the spider closer to Scott. Scott got angry, but looking at the spider, he spoke more calmly. I wanted to teach you a proper behavior. No one has ever refused me. So who should pay for the vase? Me. Jody smiled. Then she quickly grabbed the bag with a special container, put the spider inside, and ran out of the room before Scott could recover from his fear. The girl walked around the city with a smile on her face. She had come up with a good plan, and the spider had helped her so much. Yesterday she managed to take Blade unnoticed. Blade was a huge spider, but one that only looked scary on the outside, but was actually kind, affectionate, and non-poisonous. With his help, she had skillfully extracted a confession from an arrogant rich guy. Now she just needed to show the recording to Mr. Brockett to prove her innocence in breaking the vase. So, with Blade in her bag, Jody arrived at the office. Mr. Brockett was surprised to see her. Have you already collected the money? He asked. No, Jody answered challengingly. I've collected the evidence that proves my innocence. And she showed Mr. Brockett the video. Ugh, how disgusting! The boss scowled. My son has completely lost his mind. Jody, please forgive me. Forgive me. That's the last straw anyway. I shall fix everything, but I don't understand why he's so scared. Did you threaten him? Me? Jody said as if in surprise. Do you think I could? No, he told me everything himself. But why? Asked Mr. Brockett. He'll tell you himself, Jody smiled, and I'll keep this video so that there are no more complaints against me. Saying this, the girl headed for the door. Jody, Mr. Brockett called out to her, maybe you'll come back to work? I've asked the employees. Everyone was satisfied with you. Our permanent cleaner seems unable to return to her duties. Thank you, but I can't. Jody shook her head. I already have another job. And she left. She had already been offered a part-time job at the zoo in her future profession, and the girl agreed. It is easier to work with animals and insects. They are more honest. After an honest conversation with his son, Mr. Brockett laughed heartily. Jody chose a very clever way to handle everything. She is a smart girl, and it's time for you to be smart too, son, he finally said to Scott. But I'm not a fool, Scott grumbled. I know, but the army will make a real man out of you. Mr. Brockett Petrovich chuckled. Dad? Army? Are you kidding me? Scott exclaimed in horror. Mr. Brockett only grinned at this exclamation. And now Scott is in the army, gaining life wisdom, willpower, and training his body. Many cars piled up at one of the intersections in the city centre. At that moment, an ambulance siren sounded somewhere behind. Almost synchronously, the drivers of the vehicles pushed to the sides as much as they could to create a free corridor for the ambulance to pass through. But an expensive car completely blocked the passage for the ambulance and did not even try to move. The driver of the ambulance honked and blinked his lights, but the owner of the car ahead wasn't reacting. And only after several minutes, after showing an indecent gesture through the window, the driver of the car gave the gas and the ambulance was finally able to continue. Judging by the increased speed, the ambulance crew was taking a seriously ill patient to the hospital. Meanwhile, the owner of the expensive car calmly drove a block and parked in front of one of the beautiful houses. The doorbell rang, and Samantha went to open it. "Mom, I apologise for being so late. There was a traffic jam, so I got held up. By the way, where's Daddy? Is he coming for dinner?" "Of course, son. We won't be having dinner without Daddy. He has some business with his business partner. He called and asked him to wait." "Oh, but why are you so sad?" Tristan lowered his head and quietly replied, "I broke up with my girlfriend today. I got a little angry. I said some unnecessary words to her and now I'm sorry. But don't worry, it'll soon pass. And your son will be back in the company of some charming girl." With a deep sigh, the mother said, "I did not think that my son would turn out to be a heartbreaker. Your father is an entirely different man. He is inclined to observe moral values. You should take his example and stop living a dissolute lifestyle." Tristan smiled slightly in reply and went to his room. An hour later, the father of the family arrived. "Honey, I'm home, and I want to talk to you. Frederick is in trouble. His daughter is ill and he may need money urgently. I would like to spend some of our savings, if it will be necessary." Looking at his wife, Edward expected her to be indignant, but instead Samantha took his hand and said, "What a forgetful husband I have. I told you, even before our wedding, that we would solve all problems together. And since your business partner, and most importantly, your best friend needs support, we will definitely help him. Remember that only the most reliable people are next to you in a difficult time, so show Frederick that he can count on you." Edward smiled, glad to see such mutual understanding. "I was right to marry you, sweetheart, because you always support me. Well, is Tristan at home yet? Or at his friends again? You know, I'm a patient man, but there's a limit to everything. He hasn't worked in 6 months since he got kicked out of the ad agency. Sometimes I feel like he's not our son. And please don't whitewash him, because, by the way, you indulge him. And as for my company, I won't take him in. I don't want to shame myself in front of my partners." At this time, Tristan came out of his room and said loudly, "I'm sorry to interrupt your discussion about me, but I'm so hungry I can't think of anything else but food." Dinner passed almost in complete silence, because Samantha and Edward had already discussed everything, and their son was in no hurry to share the day's events. After dinner, Tristan was about to leave for his room again, but his father stopped him. "Don't rush off. I want to have a serious talk with you." Taking the hint, Samantha headed for her bedroom. "I'll watch the show while it's on TV." After closing the door behind her, Edward continued, "Tristan, you're a big boy and should already take responsibility for your life and achieve at least some goals. Aren't you ashamed in front of your own friends that you still live off your parents?" Tristan lowered his head sadly and said, "I already tried to work, but it didn't work out. You know why I was fired, don't you? Then why all this talk again? I told you I'm going to find a source of income, and I am already in the process. Don't worry, it'll be okay in the end. By the way, do you know anybody in the police department?" Edward suddenly shuddered. Well, I know a man. Why are you asking? Have you done something wrong? Tell me, son, otherwise it'll be worse. You know, I won't cover it up, but if you're innocent, I'll do everything I can to keep you out of trouble. In response, the son said the first thing that came to mind. Well, I just, recently ran a red light, so now I'm worried about the fine. Edward exhaled heavily. Oh, I even felt relieved because you scared me, son. Don't do that again. If you run a red light, it was a bad thing, and you'd better watch out. But I think we can work it out. I know people in the police, so I don't think there'll be a problem. In general, you have to watch the road and obey the rules. The next morning, when Tristan woke up, he found his father in the kitchen in an anxious state. He was talking excitedly on the phone and looking out the window. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Frederick. I talked to my wife. She approved of my idea. And come on, don't say no. We've known each other for years. Okay, I'll come to the office soon and we'll talk there. Edward put the phone in his pocket and walked away from the window. Hi, son. I'm leaving for work. My business partner called me, and Mother has already left to visit her parents. They need help there. Tristan sat down in his chair, relieved. He thought his father had been called about his stupid antics at the intersection, which he had already regretted many times. The ambulance driver might have remembered the license plate number, and even if he didn't, there was a good chance he was caught on camera. In general, his silly prank could turn into a huge problem, especially since the car was registered to his mother, and she will be the first person whom they call. Although Tristan's father asked him to start looking for a job, Tristan spent the whole day in the company of his friends, where he absolutely forgot about the ambulance and his job search. At 10:30, Tristan arrived home. His father was sitting in the kitchen and talking to his wife. Hi, everyone, and not to raise any unnecessary questions, I haven't found a job yet, but I promise I'll definitely get a job this week. Sitting down at the table, Tristan slid a platter with cheesecake to him. I'm so hungry, Mum. Thanks for your speciality cheesecake. Edward turned to his wife and continued. Well, like I said, Frederick needs help. I do not know how it could happen. Poor girl. Hearing the name of his father's business partner, Tristan asked, Is something wrong with him? Dad, you run the company together. Now we have to economize because of him. The father raised his eyebrows and said, You certainly don't have to do anything, but I have to help a good man. I can't abandon him in his time of need. Frederick's daughter was taken to the hospital yesterday. She was in urgent need of medical attention. And by the way, some fool blocked the road, can you imagine? Because of this silly prank, valuable time was lost. Her condition has deteriorated sharply, and the chances of recovery with it. I don't understand what the police are doing. By the way, yes, I should visit an old acquaintance and find out who dared to commit such mischief. I'll ask about your running a red light too. At this minute, a countdown began for Tristan, because his father could find out the truth in a heartbeat. Tristan went to his room, lay down on his bed, and stared at the ceiling in silence. For the first time he was afraid, but not for himself, but for Frederick's daughter. While he was lying there, the thought occurred to him that he should confess everything. But knowing his father, Tristan didn't risk it. At the same time, he really was eager to learn from the doctors how to help the girl. Suddenly the door opened and his mother looked in. Son, if you don't have anything important to do tomorrow, will you come with us to the cemetery? Tristan turned white with horror, and Samantha came over to him and sat down beside him. Well, why are you so nervous? We visit your cousin who died in the accident every year. Have you forgotten? Daddy's going to the office in the morning on business, and then he'll pick us up, so be ready. At the cemetery they quickly found Chloe's grave, and while his parents were cleaning it, Tristan was looking at the inscriptions of the neighbouring gravestones. Remembering the ambulance, he wept bitterly. A bewildered mother approached and hugged her son. "Oh, son, calm down. She's already in a better world. I had no idea you could be so emotional." Tristan looked at his mother and replied, "Of course you think I'm a soulless man, but I have feelings too. Father, you said your partner's daughter is in hospital. Can I visit her?" "I don't even know. She's in intensive care right now. And why would you do that? After all, you don't know her at all." "My emotions are awakened. As Mum said, I also want to help someone. Don't be surprised, but your son knows how to sympathise. True, it rarely happens." Edward took out a notebook and wrote down the address of the hospital where Frederick's daughter had been taken. Giving the piece of paper to his son, he asked again, "Don't you want to add anything? Why don't you tell me why you're suddenly interested in a strange girl?" Tristan didn't answer anything, just shrugged his shoulders. After the cemetery, Tristan began packing for the hospital. Naturally, he was not allowed into the intensive care unit, but he managed to talk to a nurse. And she said that the girl was asleep now under medication, but doctors hoped that in a week the patient's condition would improve noticeably. Tristan visited Hayley in the hospital every day. She didn't know it, but he brought flowers every time and left them with the nurse on duty. A week later, as the doctors had predicted, Hayley regained consciousness. And the first thing she saw was Tristan's face behind the glass divider. At that moment, a nurse came up to her and completely obscured her view. The guy stood there a little longer and left. He stayed away from the hospital for days, wondering what to do. Eventually, he decided to confess to the girl and ask her forgiveness. But Tristan was out of luck. Just outside her ward, he bumped into his father and Frederick. The father looked at his son with great disappointment and pain. "Well, son, come on in." The father pulled a folded sheet of paper from his briefcase. "Here's your car number, the ambulance and the exact time. Do you have anything to tell us?" 3 pairs of eyes looked at him. "Yes, I was the one who didn't miss the ambulance at the intersection. I don't know what got into me then. I was angry. I really regret what I have done. Forgive me for such a foolish behaviour, and I am ready to suffer the punishment I deserve." Frederick and his father looked at each other, and then at Hayley. "Well, what do you say? Can you forgive him?" The girl hesitated and then replied, "I think yes. Just give him to me to re-educate him." Frederick looked at his daughter. "All right, let him work off the damage he's done." Tristan's father even laughed. "Well, now at least I won't have to look after him. Maybe we'll go to the sea with Samantha. We haven't been there for a long time." "I am kidding, of course, but seriously, I hope that Hayley will make a nice person out of him." Whether she succeeded or not, it was too early to draw conclusions. But Tristan visited her in the hospital every day until she was discharged. After a while, they started dating, and then Tristan told his parents that he proposed to Hayley. The man came to his senses. He finally got the job he enjoyed and was no longer a troublemaker. Adelaide heard the key turn in the lock and, jumping out of her seat, rushed into the hallway to meet Howard from work. Before registering their relationship officially, Howard suggested that they live together so that they could get to know each other better. For 2 months they had been living together in this rented apartment, and with each passing day, Adelaide became convinced of how lucky she was to have such a fiancé. He was handsome, smart, hard-working, and had a good sense of humour. It was easy for her to communicate with Howard because he knew how to choose the right words and make her forget about troubles and bad mood right away. Howard kissed his girlfriend, and having embraced, they went into the bedroom. While Howard was changing, they usually exchanged news, and then they went into the kitchen together for dinner. It was their special daily ritual, and Adelaide always hurried home early to cook something simple but delicious. But today, for some reason, Howard didn't follow her into the kitchen, but hid behind the bathroom door. "I want to take a shower. Just 10 minutes, she heard from behind the door. The girl stood for a while, listening to the sound of pouring water, but then she heard the phone ringing somewhere. The sound was coming from the bedroom, and Adelaide, thinking she had forgotten her smartphone there, went into the room and, without looking who was calling, pressed the button to receive the call. "Howard, sweetie, are you home yet? How's your silly bride? Hasn't she guessed about us yet?" asked an unfamiliar, languid female voice. "Who are you?" shouted Adelaide. "It doesn't matter any more," said the stranger with a sneer in her voice, and laughed. "Yes, you really are stupid," she added, and hung up. Adelaide froze, trying to comprehend what had happened. She and Howard had the same phone models, and she realized that she had accidentally picked up the wrong one. Suddenly, candid pictures of Howard against the silk linen bed began to arrive at his phone almost non-stop. Adelaide was shocked. She had never seen anything like that, and could not even imagine that Howard was capable of such a thing. She went into the kitchen and sank heavily into a chair, hardly able to hold back her tears. She was pained, and most importantly, she did not understand why Howard had hurt her like that. The woman heard the bathroom door slam, and Howard shouted for her to heat up dinner and make him coffee, but she didn't even move. "Have you heard me?" asked Howard, who entered the kitchen. "Make some coffee. I'm going to work on my computer for a little bit before I go to bed," he added grudgingly. "Let the one you're posing for without clothes make it for you, sweetie," she replied and grinned. "That's the name she calls you, isn't it?" Adelaide held out the phone to Howard, and he looked at the screen and understood everything. He blushed now and then paled, not daring to look up, and tried to awkwardly adjust himself, assuring Adelaide that she had misunderstood everything. But the woman immediately made it clear that she was not as stupid as he used to think, and began to gather her things. In an hour, Adelaide was already at her friend Tina's place and told her sad story. Tina comforted her and offered to stay with her for a while. "Honestly, I was very upset when you got involved with this Don Juan," encouraged Tina's friend. "I've never liked your Howard because he was too sweet and sugary." Howard called several times until Adelaide couldn't stand it and blocked him. But Howard didn't calm down and started sending her emails. "Adelaide, in general, I haven't done anything wrong. Yes, I made a fool of myself, but to who doesn't this happen? I have truly repented, and I think that breaking off a relationship a month before the wedding is silly. Forgive me, honey." Adelaide stubbornly refused to answer, and when Howard finally realized the pointlessness of his attempts, he said offensively in the last letter that he did not want to communicate with her anymore, and she herself had pushed away her happiness. To quickly forget everything connected with Howard, Adelaide decided to immerse herself in her work, especially since she had just been offered a promotion. In the new office, her colleagues treated her friendlily, and she was glad that there were many new faces around her. Jonathan, the head of the information technology department, especially caught her attention. Jonathan looked something like Howard, but had a much more reserved character. He always spoke succinctly, focused on the point, and disliked those who wasted time with idle talk. It was for this reason that he once fired their best programmer, who was constantly distracting the rest of the staff with his chatter and demeanour. Meanwhile, Jonathan immediately appreciated the good work of the new senior marketing specialist, and the responsibility and seriousness with which Adelaide approached her work. Before the general meeting, he asked her to prepare suggestions for improving the marketing department through information technology. And when she presented her ideas, he took notes cautiously of everything she was saying. When lunchtime came around, Jonathan invited her to join him. "I'd like to discuss some of your ideas. They seem interesting to me." Adelaide sat down at Jonathan's table and all of his employees watched in amazement as their taciturn boss engaged in lively conversation. From that day on, Jonathan and Adelaide often had lunch together, attended various conferences, and worked together to organize activities for their colleagues. It was as if they felt and understood each other at a glance. All the people in the office guessed where things were going, and they were right. Very soon Jonathan proposed to Adelaide, and she accepted with pleasure. They announced their engagement to everyone and began preparations for their wedding. A mutual acquaintance told Howard that his ex-fiancée was going to marry her colleague, and the man, who was not at all worried all this time about breaking up with Adelaide, suddenly lost his temper. "Oh, you found a replacement for me so quickly? Well, no, I won't let this happen." The wedding reception was in full swing, and the wedding slideshow was ahead of the guests. But just before the banquet began, Howard had sneaked into the equipment room unnoticed, and now, when the first slides were shown, the guests froze in amazement. Images of Adelaide in revealing outfits and provocative poses appeared on the huge screen. Even the master of ceremonies, who was going to read the text to his slides given by the newlyweds, was so confused that he could not utter a word. There was a frightening silence in the hall. Jonathan, seeing the horror on Adelaide's face, resolutely took the microphone. "Dear friends, my wife and I have decided to make an original show and have chosen the most extraordinary shots. I hope you appreciate our joke," he said quietly and smiled. Jonathan smiled throughout the show as if it had been intended, and at the end he bowed jokingly. "Thank you for your attention. I was provably a little overzealous in picking over the pictures, but let's thank the person who came up with this photo montage and Photoshop." The guests sighed in relief, and Jonathan, gently kissing his wife, asked her to dance. "Forgive me," Adelaide almost sobbed on her husband's shoulder. "I don't know who decided to play such a cruel joke on me." "Darling, I only care about our present and future, and let everyone else be jealous now that I got such a stunningly beautiful woman." "I love you," was all the woman could answer. She kissed Jonathan fervently, and the guests broke into a standing ovation. Howard became angry when he realized that his efforts to disrupt the wedding, or at least embarrass his ex-girlfriend, had failed. He was sitting glumly in the living room of his mistress, who had caused his breakup with Adelaide, and he couldn't understand why his insidious plan had failed. Seeing that Howard was somehow too upset about the whole situation, his mistress advised him to calm down and not waste his energy on those who were not worth it. Howard nodded, frowning, but it was clear by the look on his face that the situation hadn't let go of him completely. Howard felt insulted. He did not see anything wrong in his betrayal, but Adelaide leaving him for another man had hurt his self-esteem. Besides, Adelaide had always made much more money than he did, and after her leaving, Howard's financial situation worsened greatly, and this irritated him most of all. 6 months passed. Jonathan was sitting in his office when he received a report of a visitor. Just by looking at the man, he realized who was in front of him. Only his wife's former boyfriend could have that angry and appraising look. "Good evening. What is the question you have for me?" asked Jonathan politely, pretending not to guess anything. "Well, how are you? Have you caught your wifey on the hot stuff with some young guy?" smirked Howard. She wasn't usually letting anyone pass by her tenacious manicured hands. "Why do you think she was transferred to another office?" "What's the purpose of all you're telling me?" replied Jonathan calmly. "To let you know who you're living with," shouted Howard angrily, and not being able to stand Jonathan's calmness, swung his arm at him. Only he didn't know that Jonathan had boxed in college, so it wasn't hard for him to knock Howard to the floor with 2 sharp blows, making him squirm in pain. "I know who my wife is, and I know who you are," Jonathan said slowly. "Take my advice. Get out of here while you're still in one piece, and don't you dare open your dirty mouth about my wife again." Howard, without saying a word, left the office. Once again, he didn't understand why his plan to defame Adelaide hadn't worked. But he wasn't going to back down. Howard began to send letters to Jonathan, describing the adventures of his wife, accompanied by obviously hastily photoshopped pictures. To his upset, Jonathan realized that Howard had not heeded his advice, but he did not tell his wife anything. She was already pregnant, and he did not want to upset her. 2 weeks later, when Adelaide saw Howard's face on the news, she called her husband in horror. "What happened? Who is he?" quietly asked her husband, getting ready for work. "It's him, my ex," Adelaide replied in shock. Meanwhile, the news channel announcer reported that the cause of the car accident that had occurred 3 days earlier was a manufacturing defect in the car's brakes. The driver failed to control the car and drove at speed into a roadblock, as a result of which he suffered multiple fractures. Jonathan nonchalantly turned off the TV and said, "Honey, don't watch TV. It's not good for our baby." "You're right," Adelaide smiled at her husband, stroking her big belly. "We will be waiting eagerly for you to come home from work." Jonathan went to work, reflecting that life itself had stopped his wife's ex-boyfriend from doing low things. Maya thought that her mother-in-law could drive a saint crazy with her behaviour. Mrs. Walker was always unhappy with everything and openly told her daughter-in-law that she had a nasty temper. In general, Maya never understood why her mother-in-law couldn't stand her. Maya's husband hadn't lived with his mother for a long time, and besides, until not long ago, her mother-in-law had had her own great life, a house, a husband, and then suddenly her husband met another woman and divorced her, kicked her out of his house. Mrs. Walker didn't think twice about asking her son for help. Maya got a bit upset and even angry because she had never seen any warm feelings or even elementary politeness from her mother-in-law. But it was a son's duty to help his mother in a difficult situation, and Maya and her husband began to think what to do. If the mother-in-law rented a place and asked her son to pay for everything, it would have led to an unclear amount of money for the family. And they had every penny to count, since Maya recently gave birth to a baby son and did not work. That's why Maya offered her mother-in-law to live in her apartment, which she had inherited from her grandmother. Maya rented it out, and it was a significant contribution to the family's budget. At first, everyone was happy with the compromise. The mother-in-law was rearranging her life and thinking about her destiny. But she quickly got settled in, and then reverted to her former behaviour when everyone around her owed her everything. She was not happy with the apartment. The washing machine was too noisy, the bed was too hard, the neighbours were too loud, the dishwasher was old, and it would be nice to renovate the rooms. Maya tried not to pay attention to this, because she didn't expect her mother-in-law to burst out in gratitude, but she hoped that at least she wouldn't be scolding the apartment where she lived for free, paying only the utilities. But soon the woman decided that even the utilities should be paid by her son. But he refused and said that he did not have any extra money, and it was really true. Then mother-in-law turned to the topic that her dear son had no money for his poor mother because he had a sponger on his neck, and that was Maya. The fact that Maya was sitting out of work because she was caring for a 6-month-old baby, did not change the picture in Mrs. Walker's eyes. She saw her daughter-in-law as a slacker who sat on her husband's neck. She often cited in conversations the examples of her acquaintances who managed to work while on maternity leave and not force her husband to drag everything alone. Maya listened to these conversations for 6 months, and then her patience ran out. She once said to her mother-in-law, "You know, your words have finally reached my heart. I decided that I was no longer going to hang on my husband's neck as a burden, but to bring in income. Since I am untalented in comparison to those women who have time on maternity leave to be with the child and clean and cook and earn a lot of money, then my income will be passive. That is, I will rent out my grandmother's apartment. Yes, the very same one where my mother-in-law is so uncomfortably housed now. What else can I do? It's hard for my husband. Mother-in-law can continue to rent the apartment. I will even give her a discount as a relative. Or she can leave the apartment if these conditions are not good for her. I will give her 3 weeks to move out. During this time, she may find an apartment where she will be happy. Another question is whether she has enough money for that. But I'm not interested in that anymore, because I'm tired of being a burden on my husband's neck." The husband, to whom Mrs. Walker rushed after this, threw up his hands and said that the apartment was Maya's and she could use it as she wished. He also told her the amount of money he could allocate to her without affecting his own family. He and Maya had discussed this amount a long time ago, and Maya had never been against it. Her husband was an adult, hard worker, and he should help his mother as much as possible, but not to the detriment of his family and child. Of course, Mrs. Walker still had many scandals about what she thought was a paltry help, but Maya was determined to bring money into the family while she took care of the baby. "My husband's mother is right," she thought, smiling. "I shouldn't sit on my man's neck. Thank her for teaching me that." "So, Abigail, have you learned how to bake your pies yet?" Ben kidded at his friend once again. "Ben, you're not original. The second year, the same stupid question. Change your record. You used to devour my delicious pies back in 5th grade," Abigail countered. "A great cook should be able to do a little bit more, which is what I'm learning. At least I go to culinary school and almost got a profession. And what about you? Did you manage to get into college before the army?" she asked, knowing perfectly well that Ben had failed the entrance exams for the university in the capital. "Now you'll be going to the army," Abigail continued to lecture him. "You'll come back with nothing, no profession, no education, and you only know how to make fun of others." Ben didn't take offence. Growing up in worker barracks, they were used to sniping and teasing each other without malice. During the last years, this style of communication had also become a kind of safety net for both of them, to avoid getting too close, something they both wanted and feared deep down. Abigail's father was disabled. He had been seriously injured at the factory, and as a result he limped badly and worked as a night watchman. When he used to return home from his shift, he never saw his wife, who worked at the library since early morning. Abigail used to meet her father before school, feed him with what her mother had prepared in advance, and then started cooking herself to help her mother. Abigail cooked her first soup at the age of 11. She liked that her cooking was praised, liked to treat the neighbours, feed her father, and all people in general. So she decided to find a culinary school to become a first-class chef. Abigail dreamed of working in a prestigious restaurant where visitors would admire the chef's art and would invite her to the hall to thank her. She often imagined their surprise when a petite, cute girl would come out instead of a big, chubby man. With these plans in mind, Abigail graduated with honours and went to Café Antoinette's, where they were looking for a cook. "It's okay," she told herself. "The path to a Michelin star goes through bistros and fast food joints. I'll be able to showcase my talent anywhere." Abigail passed a rigorous test given by Antoinette, the owner of this and a few other small but popular cafes in the city, with flying colours. However, to her surprise, the owner still took her only on probation. "This is something we do here," explained Viola, the waitress, to Abigail. "Free labour. Do you think you're the first one to work here for a month without pay? You'll work hard, they'll find something to nitpick about and you'll be gone. But firing someone is Antoinette's son's speciality. He oversees all their cafes and is the director. Gavin is young but very meticulous, always nitpicking." Abigail was unsure whether to believe Viola or not. She knew Viola was lazy, sloppy and slow, so when the young boss fired her, no one was particularly surprised. However, he constantly praised Abigail for her excellent cooking skills, speed and cleanliness in the kitchen. But to be honest, it was very difficult for Abigail. She was small in stature, and the pots and pans in the cafe were not for home use, and were very heavy and big. On an ordinary day, it was still manageable, but on weekends, large groups often ordered festive dinners in the cafe, and this was Abigail's worst nightmare. Antoinette was frugal and saved money on her employees, so Abigail had to work for 3 people. Her salary was not very high, and no one was rushing to give tips to the cook or call her out to the hall for thanks and admiration. On one of those physically exhausting and unpleasant days, Gavin approached her. "Why are you struggling here?" he exclaimed sympathetically. It was the height of summer, and the heat in the kitchen was unbearable. The owner was in no hurry to spend money on a good air conditioner. "Abigail, go work as a waitress. I'll find a male cook to replace you, someone who can handle it better. You'll work yourself to death here. We just fired Viola recently, so there's a place for you." "But how?" I stuttered. "I dreamed of becoming a cook." Abigail protested stubbornly. "Well, what did studying get you? Your education won't go anywhere. You're quick and cute, and as a waitress you'll earn twice as much in tips," Gavin persuaded her. "And when your Ben comes back from the army, you'll use the earned money to open your own cafe, and you will run it together. Do you get the idea? My mother also started as a waitress, and I'll give you advice and help. Maybe we'll even be partners." Gavin's plan was calculated. From the first days of their acquaintance, he knew that Abigail was waiting for a boyfriend from the army. The young director tried to court Abigail, but to his surprise she rejected him. Not wanting to anger the son of the cafe owner, Abigail showed Gavin a portrait of the brave Ben in his paratrooper uniform, and explained that she was engaged to him and that they would marry immediately after his return. Abigail did not lie. She told Ben herself that she loved him and would wait for him. He was happy, and he wrote her tender letters. No matter how tired she was after work, she always answered him immediately. On the day Abigail showed Gavin a photo of her fiancé, he immediately became more serious and said convincingly, "Okay, I understand. A soldier's fiancé is sacred to me." Abigail did not know then that Gavin was easily able not only to shower her with compliments, but to feign respect for her feelings for another man. He already had a plan, and he was not used to receiving refusals. A convenient opportunity soon presented itself to Gavin, or rather, it wasn't a coincidence, it was well organised. Gavin's birthday party is tomorrow. He's turning 25. The cafe will be closed on that day. Here's the menu so that everything is ready by 7 p.m. Antoinette gave instructions the day before that fateful evening. We're celebrating at the dacha. Abigail will serve the guests, and payment is double the rate. But you will have to be on top of your game, the hostess said, already addressing Abigail. Our guests are not like those who give you the crumpled dollars here. Well, crumpled or not, Abigail was happy to be a waitress. It was easier for her and more lucrative. As for her dream, well, it would come true, maybe even faster. Abigail lived very frugally, saving money and dreaming of her own little culinary business with Ben. He'll be surprised when he takes the bride with a decent dowry, Abigail thought. Thinking and dreaming like this, Abigail was getting ready for her first banquet ever. It didn't matter that she was just a waitress for now. Everything was ahead of her. It was hard to call what was happening at the dacha a banquet. There were only Gavin's friends with their girlfriends. Gavin didn't have a girlfriend for some reason, and it not only put Abigail on her guard, but reassured her. That means he's not really a playboy and takes choosing a partner seriously. He doesn't need a girlfriend for now. Meanwhile, Gavin seemed somehow sad, and Abigail pitied him a little. Birthday, everyone in pairs, kissing, hugging, sneaking off into the alleys in the house. See, nobody loves me, Abigail, he sighed, sitting down at the table that was empty by the end of the party, from which Abigail was collecting plates. Oh, come on, you're a good man, the kind girl began to console the birthday boy, and it's right to be strict. You can't do without strictness in our business, and believe me, someone will love you too when the time comes. I believe you, Gavin continued sadly. Then he asked sympathetically, Are you tired, Abigail? Yes, a little, but compared to the kitchen. That's right, I almost passed out there myself, remember? Yes, of course. Thank you for the offer. I am pleased with my new job. Let's have a drink, Gavin suggested. Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm at work and I don't drink at all. Just one cocktail, please. Here, sit down. Forget that you're at work now. Be my guest for 5 minutes, okay? The birthday boy continued affectionately. I had no one to talk to today. Sit and I'll take care of you now. Make you such a cocktail. You've never tried anything like it before. The cocktail did indeed have some unusual taste, but unlike the cooking, Abigail wasn't very knowledgeable about drinks. 10 minutes later, she felt her head spinning strangely. The girl regained consciousness the following morning, alone in bed and without clothes. Abigail had no doubt about what had happened to her, not that Gavin was not in the room. With tears in her eyes, the girl was gathering her belongings around the room. Suddenly, she heard footsteps in the house. Gavin, Abigail thought, dressing quickly. How could he? What a fool I am. But instead of Gavin, Antoinette appeared in the bedroom. Oh, it's you. So, this is what you do? Were you sent here to serve guests at the table or in bed? How many did you serve in one night? Did you make a lot of money? Keep it up then. But there is no place for cheap girls in my cafe. You won't get paid for yesterday, and don't count on severance pay either. The poor girl couldn't find her other shoe and purse. She couldn't leave without them, so she had to listen to her boss while she searched for them. Finally, she found her shoe under the bed, and the purse was in the bathroom, and fled, from the cursed house. She hitchhiked on the highway. What should she do next? How should she live? Should she confess or pretend that nothing happened? It's okay, Abigail calmed herself. I'll think of something. I won't write anything to Ben. It's not easy for him in the army either. I'll find another work and wait for him. She didn't tell her parents anything either, explaining that she no longer wanted to be a waitress. However, she planned to look for a job as a cook's assistant, preferably in a decent establishment. As a result, Abigail decided to move to the capital. She couldn't stay in her hometown after what had happened, and there were no prospects. Her persistent job search paid off. She was hired as an assistant cook at a charming family restaurant. They even provided her with a small room near the restaurant. The elderly chef and owner, Harrison, immediately appreciated Abigail's skills and her burning desire to learn all the intricacies of their craft. He was happy to share his secrets with her. This restaurant was his favourite and only offspring, and Harrison saw in Abigail a worthy replacement for himself, as he was no longer young. The probationary period flew by unnoticed, and Abigail became a full-fledged assistant to the chef. At first she was timid under the scrutinizing gaze of Gwen, Harrison's wife. However, the girl quickly understood that behind the external severity lay a kind and gentle soul of a middle-aged, childless woman hidden from outsiders. And soon one event happened that radically changed Abigail's fate. Since morning she was not feeling well. The smell of the kitchen finally made the girl ill. Clamping her mouth, she ran to the staff bathroom. Experienced Gwen assessed the situation with her trained eye. "Come on, girl, don't play games," she said quietly when Abigail came out of the restroom, blushing. "Are you pregnant?" "What are you talking about, Gwen? My fiancé is in the army, and I haven't been with anyone else." Abigail faltered and remembered her recent past, bursting into tears. She told this practically unknown woman about what she didn't dare to tell her mother or father. At Gwen's advice, Abigail purchased a pregnancy test at a nearby pharmacy. The 2 stripes left no doubt that she was pregnant. "What are you going to do?" Gwen asked. "I don't want this child. His father is a scoundrel. Gwen, please tell me how to get rid of it quietly." "Where should I go? To the hospital?" "I'll tell you," Gwen said, "but first, Abigail, listen to me. I was also a fool like you once and got pregnant by my own stupidity at 19. I thought it was too early, so I went to the hospital, and God punished me for that, because he didn't give me any more children. And my Harrison wanted kids so badly." Abigail looked at Gwen in surprise. "Yes, my dear, I was young and wondered what to do with a child at that point. We had just started to stand on our own 2 feet. I had done that without listening to my husband. He was upset with me for a long time, but eventually forgave me. But what's the use? I will never forgive myself, and I won't let you do it either. Do you hear me? I won't take my eyes off you, at work or at home, and when you give birth, we'll help. Don't come back home. They won't let you live there peacefully with the child. Ben's mother will start ruining your life because you betrayed her son, in her opinion. You don't need this now. You'll figure it out later. Life is long, believe me." And so they did. Eventually, Abigail had to confess to her parents, who were anxious about why their daughter had completely forgotten about them. And she couldn't hide her growing belly any more. Her mother cried, her father sighed, but with the mother-in-law was very unpleasant conversation. Sensing trouble, she went to the capital, found the restaurant where Abigail was working, and burst into the kitchen. Seeing Abigail's rounded waistline, she screamed in disgust. "Oh, you're such a wretch! That's the way you're waiting for my Ben, huh? And I see now why your mother doesn't look into my eyes. Forget about my son, once and for all. I'll write everything to him as it is." Soon Ben's farewell letter arrived. He didn't judge her, but he didn't want to know her any more, and wished her happiness. And happiness came to Abigail, though it was difficult and hard won. But is there any other way? Happiness came with the birth of her daughter, with her beloved job, which Abigail didn't give up before or after giving birth, with her parents, those who gave her life and those who practically saved life to her little girl. Over time, Abigail became the head chef of the family restaurant, and then the full-fledged owner. Her named parents passed away with a difference of just over a month, just 6 months short of their golden wedding anniversary. They both passed very suddenly, but without suffering, leaving all their property, restaurant and apartment to their named daughter Abigail in their will. Abigail's biological were also no longer alive, but she had her daughter Haley. As befits a modern 20-year-old girl, she was a student, athlete and beauty, and she already had a fiancé. However, there were no changes in Abigail's personal life. No, of course she wasn't a nun, and she had romances, some relationships in her life, but she either wasn't proposed or she didn't want to marry those who proposed to her. But frankly speaking, she was proposed often. She was beautiful, had money, an apartment in the capital, a restaurant, but her heart was silent. She even went with a friend to a famous fortune-teller once. "You'll have a meeting waiting for you," the fortune-teller confidently said, "very soon." Abigail even laughed. "What kind of a meeting do I need when I have plenty of meetings in the restaurant?" And the next day, Ben came to her to apply for a job as a driver. He, as it turns out, also lived in the capital, but recently he moved here after divorcing his wife, leaving her the apartment in their hometown. Abigail and Ben had forgiven each other long ago, of course. After all these years, what could they share except the rest of their lives? Half a year later, Ben and Abigail decided to live together. He quickly grasped all the nuances of her business and became her manager. Haley studied in another city. Every day she and Abigail would video call each other and share details about their day. It was during one of these calls that Haley found out about Ben, a new employee at the restaurant who happened to be a long-time acquaintance of her mother's and with whom she grew up together and even loved since childhood. As Abigail never told her daughter about her father, Haley understood it all in her own way. "Mum, just admit it. Ben is my dad." "And why didn't he marry you before, but only now accidentally found you? Of course, now that you have restaurants, apartments, he left you then, didn't he?" Abigail had to reveal the whole truth to her adult daughter. She explained that Haley's biological father had succumbed to drug addiction and spent all of his money before dying on an overdose several years ago. Haley's grandmother, Antoinette, died earlier from a heart attack, unable to survive bankruptcy. Abigail knew all of this because she regularly travelled to her hometown, first to visit her parents, then to clean up their graves. Haley listened to her mother. It seemed to her that she wasn't telling her life to her, but some kind of soap opera or a woman's novel. But Haley was young and didn't yet understand how complex life can be. When she returned from college on vacation and learned that her mother and Ben were living together, she teased them. "You're really something, at 40 years of age to get married." "We are not old people at all," Abigail smiled. "Wait and see. We'll give you a little brother in 8 months, and you'll be able to babysit." Hearing this, Ben's face lit up with joy. This was news that Abigail had been keeping from him, waiting for Haley's arrival to share it as a surprise. Ben hugged his beloved and whispered that he loved her very much. Ben and Abigail were happy because life only begins at 40. However, that's another story. A massive boat, more like a covered awning, slowly moved across the water, and Abigail leaned on the high rails, admiring the ocean and the wild, overgrown islands that adorned this part of the coast. Abigail was incredibly happy and still couldn't believe what had happened. Not long ago, she was a poor girl from the countryside, working as a maid in a rich house. She could only sigh excitedly while looking at the owner's son. And now, the handsome Gavin was her husband, and he brought her here to rest together on a beautiful island lost in the ocean. But how did it all happen? Abigail smiled, feeling like she was in a fairy tale about the poor, unhappy Cinderella. Only instead of a fairy, she had Aunt Lynn. Lynn had been working as a cook in different rich families for many years and was delighted with her life. One day, when she came to her native village, she met with her niece and told her about the prospects that the metropolis offered to people. "Do you understand that there is an entirely different level of life there? It's just a dream. You can't imagine, Abigail, what kind of houses they have, how people live, or how much money they have." "Auntie," the girl objected with a smile, "but that's their money, not ours." "But they can become yours, silly. If I were as young and beautiful as you, I would never have stayed languishing in this backwater. Tell me, what prospects await you here? To marry some farmer or blue-collar worker and have a bunch of children who will always cling to your hem? Is that what you want?" "Auntie, why are you exaggerating so much? Of course, I'm not going to get married now. Ben and I are just dating, but I am willing to become his wife and have a couple of charming kids with him." "What does your Ben do?" "He's an auto mechanic." "That's it. Stop talking about him, please. I spent 15 years turning someone like your Ben into a normal person, and to no avail. Believe me, dear, it's impossible. I regret one thing, that I wasted those years instead of living like a human being." Abigail understood that it was pointless to argue with her aunt, but she still listened to her stories about the lives of wealthy people with pleasure. After spending a week at home, Lynn left again, and Abigail parted with her cheerful and optimistic aunt with great regret, especially since she could not come earlier than a year later. But it was not even a month later when Lynn called Abigail and demanded that she drop everything and fly to her immediately. "Abigail, we have a vacancy for a maid here, and I recommended you to my employers. Buy a plane ticket and come here. The vacancy won't wait." "Auntie, are you crazy?" exclaimed Abigail, feeling, however, how strongly her heart was beating. "What will Ben say?" "What difference does it make to him? Who is he to you? If he likes it, let him sit in his car shop and poke around in other people's cars, instead of buying himself a normal, decent car." "Auntie, we already talked about this. He doesn't have the money for it." "Then let him shut up and not interfere with you earning money." But Ben did not remain silent, and when Abigail told him that she wanted to leave, he got angry. "I can't go with you. You know perfectly well that I have a sick mother, and in addition to everything else, I take care of her." "Then I'll go alone. Ben, understand, I also want to work. My aunt says they pay well there." Abigail affectionately took her fiancé's hand, but he jerked it away. "You're just like everyone else. You only care about money. Have you thought about how we'll be, you there and me here?" "Well, what's the big deal? Even married couples live separately if one of them goes to work far away. Abigail tried to object. People can live however they want, but I have different principles. My wife should always be here by my side, Ben replied. Well, I'm not your wife. What difference does it make? We have something serious between us, and I was going to propose to you, but now I'm uncertain if I should, Ben said. Well then, stay here with your principles, Abigail shouted, and I'm leaving tomorrow, and I won't come back to you. Suit yourself, Ben exclaimed in anger, hitting the wall with his fist before storming off and slamming the door behind him. Abigail burst into tears. She didn't want to leave Ben and had hoped he would understand her, but now they had foolishly quarrelled and separated forever. After standing there for another minute, Abigail ran after Ben. She wanted to apologize and tell him that she wouldn't go anywhere, that she would stay with him. When she ran out into the street, Ben was getting into his old Ford. The girl called out to him, but Ben didn't even look her way and drove off without a glance back. Seeing this, Abigail felt angry at him and firmly decided to break up with him. The next evening she boarded a plane that easily carried her away to a new life. Aunt Lynn had been right. Abigail enjoyed working together with her at the house of Mr. and Mrs. Shartoff. They were both no longer young people and treated their servants well, never delaying their salaries. What more could Abigail dream of? Only of their son, Gavin. He had recently turned 30, but still couldn't start a family, preferring short-lived relationships with different girls. This drove Mr. Shartoff crazy, and he often threatened to disinherit his son if he didn't pull himself together. Gavin just laughed at his father's threats, knowing full well that he had a soft and laid-back character. Gavin was the only child of Mr. and Mrs. Shartoff, and he had been used to doing only what he wanted since childhood. At the same time, he had an excellent education, spoke 3 languages fluently, and helped his father a lot in his business, though he remained a restless prankster in his personal life. Lately, after breaking up with one of his passions, he had spent a lot of time in clubs and returned from there quite drunk. One evening he came home barely able to stand. Abigail, who was in the living room at the time, managed to catch Gavin to prevent him from falling. "Why don't you take care of yourself?" she said to him, helping him to his bedroom. "You're so sweet," he said, instead of answering, his tongue barely moving. "Looks like I really overdid it today. Oh, thank you. If my dad saw me in this state, it would be bad. Don't tell him, okay?" Abigail laughed. "Okay, I won't." In the bedroom, Gavin asked Abigail to undress him, and she complied, then helped him to lie down. A minute later he was already asleep, and she, standing over him for a moment, neatly folded his clothes and went to her room. From that evening on, Abigail felt her heart pounding at the sight of Gavin, and if he hadn't noticed her before, now he was throwing interested glances at the girl. This made her blush and hurry away somewhere, but one day, accidentally bumping into him in the hallway, she ended up in his arms and nearly went crazy with happiness when he kissed her. With difficulty regaining her senses, Abigail broke free from his grasp and hurriedly went to her room. Gavin, however, was not going to stop and began to constantly show her attention. And so in a very short time she fell in love with him, forgetting about everything else in the world. One night he came into her room and woke her up with a kiss. Abigail tried to resist, but she couldn't. For almost 2 weeks, Gavin came to Abigail every night, until one day Lynn caught him in bed with her niece. She had a headache and decided to ask Abigail for some pills, but when she entered the room, she froze at the sight of what she shouldn't have seen. Without hesitation, Lynn shouted for the whole house to hear, and Gavin's parents came down to find out what happened. "Your son seduced my niece," Lynn declared to Mr. Shartoff. "Of course she's also at fault, but you can understand the girl. Naive fool believes in love at first sight, and couldn't resist him. Who will need you now? And he, as usual, is drunk. Just look at him." "Don't worry, Lynn," Gavin's father said angrily. "My son will marry your niece, since he likes her so much, and maybe I'll finally have some grandchildren." Gavin's mother cried. Gavin started shouting at his father. Abigail was crying too, huddled in the corner. Only Lynn stood calmly, with her arms crossed and a victorious look. The scandal was grandiose, and in the end, Gavin left the room, slamming the door with all his might. His parents followed him. Alone with her aunt, Abigail became brave. "Why did you do all this? I didn't want anyone to know." "Listen, since you let him into your bed, finish what you started. And think, do you want to be his wife or just another abandoned girl he wiped his feet on? Do you know why the maid who worked here before you left? Because he brainwashed her in the same way, and then left her, threatening to ruin her reputation if she told someone. In the end, he paid her a little and advised her to leave his house. She wasn't lucky to have an aunt like me, and believe me, I'll make sure you become his wife, and then we'll see how it goes." Lynn kept her word, and 2 months later, Abigail became Gavin's wife. Mr. Shartoff organised a magnificent wedding, but the newlyweds couldn't go on a honeymoon because Gavin was too busy with his business. Only 6 months later, he finally managed to take 2 weeks off to rest with his wife on the ocean coast. "Listen, Gavin, can we go to some island? I saw pictures in magazines. It's so beautiful," Abigail asked her husband. "Okay," he agreed, looking at her strangely. "You'll have your island." And now they were sailing on this huge, strange boat, with a couple of locals manoeuvring it skillfully between the islands. While Abigail was admiring the beauties of nature, Gavin was talking to the ship's owner. "Is this a residential island?" he asked, pointing to a patch of land covered in lush greenery. "It used to belong to some millionaire," he replied eagerly. "Well, no one has been here for many years." "Why?" "That millionaire I told you about. He had the largest serpentarium here. He got rich from snakes, grew, crossed and sold them, as well as harvested venom for sale. Something went wrong once. Anyway, after he didn't answer the calls for a long time, people came to the island and found the millionaire and his 5 assistants dead. They all died from snake bites. The millionaire lay in his bed, covered in dozens of snakes." "And what happened next?" asked the interested Gavin. "Nothing. The millionaire had no heirs and no will. I don't know who owns the island now. It has been abandoned for many years, but the snakes have multiplied incredibly. People are afraid to come here because it's a sure death," the captain replied. Gavin looked at the captain strangely but said nothing. Abigail, who didn't know any foreign languages, didn't understand anything from the conversation between her husband and their guide, and continued to admire the surroundings calmly. When their walk ended and they returned to the island where their bungalow was, Gavin hugged his wife. "Well, are you happy?" he asked. "Yes, dear, very much," she replied. She did not see how her husband winced at her words. He once again thought about how much he hated his own wife, who was forced upon him against his wishes. Gavin gave in, realizing that this time his father was not joking and would not forgive him. But how tired he was of this stupid peasant woman. Gavin was ashamed to show her to his friends. She was nothing like his fashionable, glamorous girlfriends. But he couldn't divorce her and lose his inheritance because of this wretch. And how could he get rid of this hated wife? There was no way out, and Gavin endured, waiting for the first convenient opportunity, And now it seemed that it had come. It was the perfect solution, to take his wife to an island teeming with snakes and leave her there. Later, he could say that he didn't even suspect the danger. No one will suspect him of evil intent. And who would accuse a grieving widower who lost his young wife? People would be told that they stopped on the island for only an hour. They wanted to be alone, feel like Adam and Eve. Who would judge them for that? Then he would tear, saying that while he was unloading the boat, Abigail went into the thicket. He heard her screams, rushed to help, but it was too late. His wife, bitten by poisonous snakes, died in his arms. But he himself managed to escape a terrible death, returning to the boat. Gavin smiled. The plan was magnificent. No one would suspect anything, and everything would work out as he intended. Abigail, on the other hand, had no idea, enjoyed her lunch with an appetite, and when her husband suggested another sea walk in the evening, renting a boat for this purpose, she eagerly agreed. "Gavin, darling, this is so romantic. I love you very much." "I love you too, dear," Gavin replied calmly. "Maybe we should ask our captain," she suggested. "You can't handle boats." "I wanted to ask him too, but it's not going to work. He left an hour ago. His daughter is getting married and he took 2 weeks off. Only his assistants are left here. But don't worry, the weather won't change and I'm not planning to sail far." "Or are you afraid?" Gavin smirked. "No, what are you talking about? I'm not afraid of anything with you." "Well, that's great." Gavin confidently piloted the small boat they had rented, while Abigail admired him and felt lucky to have him as her husband. Aunt Lynn was right, she thought. One should take everything from life, and Abigail was somehow lucky. "Listen," Gavin's voice rang out. "Let's approach this island. When I was a child, I was fascinated by Robinson Crusoe's adventures, and I couldn't miss the opportunity to feel like my favorite hero. And you'll be my Friday." "Why Friday?" Abigail was surprised. "Just don't tell me you haven't read this book." "No, I didn't have time to read. I helped my mother with the household chores and also worked with her on the farm." "Okay," Gavin smiled. "It doesn't matter. Actually, well, we docked. Welcome to the deserted island." "Why is it deserted? Look, there are some buildings over there." "Yes, exactly. Well, you can go and see what's there while I get our supplies out of the boat." Abigail took only a few steps along the overgrown path and immediately found herself in a real jungle. She turned around to call Gavin and saw him sailing away, leaving her on the island. "Gavin! Gavin, where are you going?" She rushed to him, but he didn't even turn at her voice. After a few minutes, he disappeared from sight, circling the island. Abigail was left alone. Confused, not understanding anything, the girl burst into tears. She did not expect such a move from her husband and was terrified. Abigail spent an hour on the shore, hoping Gavin would return soon. Then she decided to get to the house, hidden deep on the island, and see if there was a phone there. But as soon as she entered the surrounding jungle, she heard a vicious hissing and instinctively jumped back, screaming in horror. Several snakes were writhing under her foot, and a giant python hung from the nearest tree, swaying its triangular head. Abigail ran to the shore, only now noticing that the sand was marked with strange stripes. Snakes crawled out to bask in the sun, leaving their traces on the sand. Abigail yelled incessantly, and when she saw Gavin's boat, she fell unconscious on the hot sand. Gavin, pleased that his plan had worked, loaded his wife's lifeless body into the boat and hurried to his safe island. Then he carried her in his arms, planning to call for help. But then Abigail came to her senses, jumped to her feet, and attacked her husband, slapping him in the face. "You left me there! You left me! Wanted those creatures to eat me! I hate you! I hate you!" The bewildered Gavin tried to justify himself, but she didn't even listen and demanded that they return home immediately. "I beg you, don't tell my father anything." "Why, should I pity you? Didn't you pity me? I don't understand why you did this." "Because I wasn't supposed to marry you. I didn't want to." "What did you want? Just to have fun? Do you think that's fair? I don't think so. I am also a living person with feelings and a soul. I married you not for money, but because I loved you. But don't worry. As soon as we get back, I will file for divorce myself, and I will tell your father that you are not to blame for anything." "What do I owe you for this?" "Nothing. Just make sure I never see you again." A few days later, Abigail and Gavin were back home and filed for divorce. Aunt Lynn was shocked by her niece's decision, but Abigail never told her why she refused to stay married to Gavin. "I'm going back home," she said. "I don't need this beautiful life, soaked in hypocrisy and lies." Lynn just sighed in response. Abigail returned to her hometown, thinking about how much she wanted to see Ben. She even went to his auto repair shop, but it turned out that he no longer worked there. "Don't you know," his partner Paul asked her, "almost right after you left, Ben got into a car accident. He had a very hard time dealing with your breakup." "He's dead?" Abigail exclaimed. No, he's alive, but he can only move around in a wheelchair now. He needs money for treatment. We and our friends have pitched in, but it's just a drop in the bucket." Abigail didn't say anything else, turned around and walked away. At home, she called Gavin. "Listen, I would never ask you for help, but I want you to help one person. He needs to get back on his feet. My life for his life. This is my only request." "Okay, I'll do everything. We have acquaintances in Germany. They will help," Gavin said. "And also, Abigail, please forgive me." 3 years passed. Abigail was married to Ben, gave birth to a son for him, and only then realized that she was perfectly happy. Ben knew where the money for his treatment came from. Abigail confessed everything to him. "We shouldn't part with you," Ben said. "When we're not together, we make many mistakes." "Yes, because happiness is only where there is love," Abigail replied, hugging her husband. "I think I'll be looking for a new partner," Ben told Gavin. "Don't take offense, buddy, but I'm bored with you. We can't pick up girls on the road, play cards, or hang out at the pub after work. What kind of partner are you?" "Mr. Gosling didn't complain," Gavin muttered through gritted teeth. "Your Mr. Gosling was a rare bird among us. He raised you to be just like him. You spent 5 years with him. What did you see besides the road? And what good did he teach you? How to give every penny to your wife?" "Well, how else? That's what a wife is for, to keep the house, wait for her husband to come back from the trip, raise children," Gavin said. "And how many kids has your Amara given you?" "Don't make me laugh, buddy," Ben replied. Gavin gripped the steering wheel so hard that his knuckles turned white, and his face began to flush with anger. "Don't get upset. You see, all women are the same. They just want more money," Ben said, waving his hand dismissively. Gavin was aware that 2 years ago, Ben narrowly avoided going to prison. Returning from his work earlier than expected, he caught his wife in bed with her lover. "Thank God I was sober. Otherwise, it would have ended badly for both my wife and her lover, and that guy turned out to be no pushover. He managed to defend himself," said Ben. "My wife is not like that, and I don't want to talk about it any more," Gavin said, trying to keep his emotions in check. His mentor and friend, old Mr. Gosling, who retired 2 months ago, was his example. During all the 5 years they worked together, Gavin tried to be like him in everything. Mr. Gosling had a great family, with children and grandchildren, and Gavin admired him and wanted to be like him. The man thought about quitting trucking altogether. What kind of life is this? I'm on the road and Amara is alone at home, he thought. Before the trip, they had a big argument about money. Gavin thought he earned decently, but Amara was sure he had additional income, which he spent on his own entertainment on the road instead of buying gifts for her. Amara outdid herself this time. Michelle, her friend, returned from another trip, and her husband immediately gave her a new mink coat. Amara couldn't help but remember all of Gavin's futile attempts to make her happy on her birthday, and how she had been stuck wearing the same winter jacket for the 3rd year in a row instead of a coat. Gavin tried to justify himself, saying that he had given her everything to the last penny, and that if Amara wanted, she could save up for a mink coat. He believed that such coats were impractical because you couldn't ride the subway in them. His last argument drove Amara crazy. "Oh, how wonderful! Why do I need a coat if I don't have a car? Logical, right? Michelle needs one more fur coat because she drives, but why do I need it?" Amara shouted something else, but Gavin couldn't listen to it any more and ran out of the house, followed by reproaches that he was a miser and had ruined her life. Now, returning from his trip, Gavin decided to come home with a nice gift in his hands. He bought Amara a big plush teddy bear with a red satin ribbon, a huge bouquet of roses and golden earrings. It was already late and the apartment windows were dark. She's not waiting, she's upset, Gavin thought bitterly. The phone had been silent all week. He knew it wouldn't be easy to reconcile, but he was willing to do anything to make it happen. Quietly opening the door and turning on the hallway light, Gavin was stunned by what he saw. Instead of new Italian boots, ankle boots, and fashionable shoes, there was a pair of rather worn autumn shoes on the shoe rack. Instead of a trendy coat, hats and purses, a windbreaker and a knitted hat hung on the hanger. What's going on? Where did Amara get all this from? Is she trying to show me that we're poor? Thought Gavin. He sat down on a poof near the coat rack to calm himself down, as Mr. Gosling, who was skilled in family life, had taught him. After counting to 10, he went to the bedroom. Without turning on the light, he placed his wife's favourite roses next to her, sat the teddy bear down, put a box of earrings in its hands, and pressed a button. The bear started singing a little song for Amara about how much he loved her, and Gavin gently kissed his wife. But she suddenly jumped up. "I don't understand. Who are you?" Gavin exclaimed, realising that he was kissing not Amara. Amara had a short haircut, but the woman sleeping in their bed had fluffy hair that smelled of spring grass and something else that was indescribably familiar. In the next moment, Gavin realised why he recognised the scent. He turned on the night lamp and saw the face of his once beloved Clara in front of him. "Is that you? How did you get here? Where have you been all these years? I've been looking for you," exclaimed Gavin, bombarding Clara with questions. The woman only smiled bitterly in response, waiting for Gavin to remember his wife finally, which he did almost immediately. "And where is Amara?" asked Gavin. "Amara? Well, that's where you should have started. Amara left. Go take a shower after your trip and then come to the kitchen. I'll feed you and tell you everything," Clara replied. Only now Gavin realised what else, beside other people's belongings, struck him from the threshold. It was an unfamiliar smell, one that reminded him of a home where someone was waiting for him. As he listened to Clara in the kitchen, he realised how hungry he was after the trip and eagerly attacked the homemade food prepared by the woman. However, the conversation that followed left him shocked. Many years ago, Amara had been in love with Gavin and had found Clara after learning about his upcoming wedding to her. She begged for a meeting and cried down the phone. When they met, Amara tearfully admitted to Clara that she was pregnant with Gavin's child, and even showed her the tear-stained ultrasound results. "I don't understand," Gavin said, horrified. "Amara was never pregnant. How could you believe such nonsense? You disappeared, and you didn't answer my calls." "I was very hurt, Gavin," Clara replied. "Then I saw the doctor's report. I was shocked. Amara assured me that she loved both you and your future child, and that she would never get rid of your love. She said that if I didn't comply, she would leave, have the baby, and you would never hear from them again." "Oh my God," Gavin exclaimed. That was her friend Michelle. She worked in gynecology back then, and she married a rich man. "I don't have any children, and I never had any children." "But you're wrong in this," Clara said, sadly smiling. "You have a son who's almost 5 years old." Gavin couldn't believe his ears. Too much had happened to him that evening. "I have a son?" he repeated, seeming on the verge of going crazy. "Back then I didn't suspect I was pregnant. I didn't have any morning sickness or dizziness that I had heard about. Only when my belly started growing did I realize," Clara explained. "Why didn't you tell me then?" Gavin asked. "To be honest, I was very angry with you. But then I thought that you still had the right to know, so I went to see you on my day off. I was near your house when you and Amara in a white dress got into the car. It was the day of your wedding. I didn't want to ruin it for you. I wanted at least one child to have a complete family," answered Clara. "I'm so relieved you decided to tell me everything today," exclaimed Gavin. "It's not quite like that, Gavin," Clara said. "There's no happiness here, and I wouldn't have dared to disturb your family if it weren't for my circumstances. I decided to come to your house, thinking that Amara would have no reason to blame you or me, and that as a mother she would understand me. But she laughed in my face and called me a naive fool who still believes in fairy tales. She admitted that she deceived me back then and wasn't even ashamed of it. In love and war, all means are good. She said she's leaving you. At that time, there was a bald man in the apartment. She called him Dominic and gave him orders about her things, which he was loading into his SUV. Gavin was finally able to eat in peace. Clara reheated the cold dinner and propped her chin up with her fists as she watched him eat. For years, Clara had dreamed of simply feeding her beloved husband like this, but her personal life hadn't worked out. She couldn't forget her first love, and the circumstances of her life didn't lend themselves to romantic encounters and serious relationships. First there was the move, then the pregnancy, and then the birth of their son. "And what are your extreme circumstances?" "Oh, what a fool I am. I didn't ask the main question. Where is our son?" Clara, who had been holding on for dear life during the previous few days, suddenly burst into tears. "He is alive, Gavin, but our little son needs your help urgently. He has a serious illness and is currently in the hospital. He has leukemia and requires a bone marrow transplant. I wasn't a donor match, so all hope is on the father," cried Clara. Gavin stepped in as a donor, and the operation was a success. The child recovered. Temporarily leaving his job as a long-distance truck driver, Gavin started driving a taxi to spend more time with Clara and their son. Later, he and Mr. Gosling opened a small auto repair shop. They found a good location, and over time their small business started to bring in excellent income. Gavin's family also grew. After divorcing Amara, Gavin married Clara. Their son, his little brother, was born, and 3 years later, a little sister joined the family. Now Gavin's apartment had become a real home, with the smell of pies and children's laughter. Everything he had dreamed of. "We need another place to live," Gavin decided, and on his daughter's 3rd birthday, his family moved into a spacious house near their 2nd. recently opened auto repair shop. Gavin's mother was immensely happy and grateful to the heavens for sending him a good and loving wife. Many years later, Gavin accidentally ran into his ex-wife. An old business-class car pulled up in front of the new car repair shop, and an older bald man called out to the young man in the branded jumpsuit, "Hey kid, we need to change the tyres to summer ones. How much is it?" After hearing the price, the bald man started bargaining. "Dominic, I told you no one will do anything for you for free. It's disgusting that we came all the way here just to save 3 cents. I hate these wretches. And you too, ugly freeloader." It was Amara with her husband Dominic. She had made a big mistake in marrying him. After their divorce, Dominic still boasted a little, but then had to admit that all his money was essentially his wife's, along with their apartment and luxury car. In the future, Dominic and Amara had to rely only on his very modest salary, which was only slightly higher than Gavin's. Over time, when the elderly boss was replaced by a younger and more energetic employee, Dominic and Amara had to live only on their very modest salary as ordinary managers. Amara's attempts to have a romance with the new boss ended in failure. He was happily married, and the years were no longer on Amara's side. Young, energetic girls not only stepped on her heels, but also simply pushed such considerably battered ladies as Amara into a corner of life's mundane routine. As the spouses argued, a young worker who seemed familiar to Amara politely smiled and offered to help. "Don't worry, we'll solve your problem now. The owner is here. I'll invite him. I'm sure he'll understand your situation," he said, pulling out his mobile phone. "Dad, come here, please. I can't handle this without you." Amara was shocked when the workshop owner came out to them. She realized that the young man in a branded jumpsuit was her ex-husband's son. "Hello, how can I help you?" "I'm listening carefully," Gavin addressed Dominic, not even paying any attention to Amara. Dominic began to explain that he had come to this car repair shop as a budget-friendly place, but Amara interrupted him. "Dominic, let's stop this and leave immediately." She was boiling with anger. All this situation was humiliating enough, and she couldn't stay here for another minute. "You're getting on my nerves. Don't interfere in men's conversation," Dominic angrily threw at Amara and continued. "Can we have on a discount?" "Yes, of course. We have discounts for old cars," Gavin responded. "Son, make them a discount and hurry up. Remember, it's Grandma's birthday today, and I need to buy flowers and go to the jewellery store for a gift. Don't be late. Bye." Gavin got into his parked new car and left, pretending not to recognise Amara and her former boss. "I didn't want to embarrass her, Mum," Gavin explained to his mother in the evening as he handed her gifts. "Oh, son, your story is better than any gift. Thank you for my favourite flowers and such a beautiful ring. But I've never worn gold rings before." "It's okay, Mum. You're 70. Never late to get used to. Happy birthday, my dear." Tara was 3 years old when her mother left her and her father for another man. She remembered her very vaguely, and when she became an adult, she finally stopped recalling her mother, who did not need her. Tara was living with her father and was happy. Tara's father never let his daughter get bored, much less cry, and although they lived modestly, they had enough money for visits to exhibitions and theatres, and for trips to the mountains or the sea. Most of all, the girl liked the mountains. They always attracted Tara, but she could only admire them from afar. Her father worried about his daughter and wouldn't allow her to go to the mountain climbing, and she had to give up her dream. But as hikers, she and her father visited the mountains frequently and went for long walks, admiring the rushing mountain rivers and waterfalls. One day, when Tara was 7 years old, while camping with her father in the mountains, she saw a boy about 10 years old, fixing a safety harness on himself. His mother was standing next to him, holding 2 helmets. Tara said hello to them and asked, "Are you real climbers?" The boy nodded. "We're waiting for my dad. He'll be here now and we'll start climbing." "Are you climbing too?" Tara sighed and said she would love to, but her father wouldn't let her. Seeing him approaching, she waved cheerfully at him. "Daddy, just imagine! These are real climbers," she said excitedly. "Well then, let me take a picture of you all," Tara's father replied with a smile. This picture became Tara's favourite, and it still stands on the shelf in her room, but unfortunately she hadn't even asked the boy's name then. Years went by. Tara graduated with honours from school, then from university. To celebrate the event, her father invited his daughter to a restaurant. Sitting with Tara at a table, her father was looking at Tara and sadly thought about how quickly she had grown up. From a little inquisitive girl, she somehow, imperceptibly, turned into a charming young woman with a soft smile and kind eyes. At dinner they laughed merrily and talked about all kinds of topics. The father cautiously asked if his daughter was going to get married, and she assured him that when it happened, he would know about it at once. He smiled. There had never been any secrets or misunderstandings between them, and so he decided to be frank too. "You know, we have a new employee in the office recently. Her name is Hayley." The father hesitated a little. "I think she's a very kind and pretty woman. Do you think I'm too old to—" "Daddy, you're not old at all." Tara looked at her father in surprise and laughed. "I'm so glad you've finally met a woman you'll be happy with. Will you introduce us?" "Of course, dear," smiled the father. Soon after that day, her father said to Tara that Hayley had invited them to dinner. That evening, Tara saw her father next to a woman for the first time. The calm, pleasant, and modest Hayley really impressed Tara. The girl saw how they looked at each other, how tenderly they held hands, and was glad that her father was finally loved and happy. The evening went wonderfully, and the next day Tara decided to have a serious talk with her father. "Daddy, I want you and Hayley to live together. It would be easier and more comfortable for you, and I'm going to rent myself a separate apartment. I'm an adult. It was time to do it. What do you think of my idea?" "Well, Tara, I've been waiting a long time for a conversation like this. You're an adult. You're a very independent, determined and serious girl. I'll let you go free. If you'd like, let's explore a good option together." They immediately went to look for suitable options in a modern apartment complex near Tara's work, and quickly found a small but very cosy studio apartment. Tara was happy with her new home. But she was able to enjoy the peace and quiet for exactly 1 week, until her new neighbours moved into the apartment above. Tara didn't understand what was going on up there, but they constantly had something falling, jingling, and she could hear screaming, sometimes even at night. Once the girl took some of her work home to study important documents in peace, but she quickly realized that nothing would work. Something incomprehensible was going on in the apartment above again, and Tara, unable to endure this outrage any longer, resolutely went up to the floor above and rang the doorbell instantly. The noise had stopped, but no one opened the door. However, the next door opened, and an elderly woman looked out from behind it. "It's no use calling. They don't open to anyone. I tried to reach the district police officer, but he talked to them and left, and they were still making noise. I only saw a young woman who often came in with heavy grocery bags. I often heard her voice arguing with someone." Tara was indignant, but went back to her place with nothing. A week later, the sounds finally got quieter. Tara was happy to find peace again, until one day, about a month later, she saw her stretch ceiling sag dangerously above her head, taking a bizarre bulging shape. Tara rushed out of the apartment with all her might. She had never been so angry. "Just open the door, and I'll give you a scandal, you shameless!" The thought beat frantically in her head as she pressed and pressed the doorbell. The door swung open so suddenly that Tara was confused, and then she lowered her eyes to see a young man sitting in a wheelchair. He was all wet and dishevelled. "You must be the neighbour downstairs. I'm sorry, I guess I flooded you. You see, the faucet in the bathroom had broken down, and while I was able to shut it off, the water leaked to you. I'll give you money to fix it. Don't worry. Come on in, but don't slip. I've got floods everywhere." Tara's heart squeezed with pity and remorse. It was clear to her now that it was the young man's wheelchair that had been making that noise. She imagined how difficult it was for her neighbour to get in and out of it every time, and also she was struck by his unexpectedly soft and pleasant voice. She felt insanely sad and hurt that such a handsome and strong man could only get around in a wheelchair. She was so upset that she didn't immediately realize that the man had already returned from the room and was holding out money to her. No, I don't need it. I'll fix it myself. I'm sorry, I had no idea." The girl shook her head. "But wait, I can't let you do that. It's my fault." The man was embarrassed. Tara mumbled some kind of apology again and left the apartment. She went down a couple of steps, but suddenly she turned around and saw that he was watching her. An idea crossed her mind abruptly. She asked his name and who he lived with. "My name is Sean. I used to live with my wife, but she left me recently, and now I'm alone. Why, do you need this?" "My name is Tara. I thought it might be hard for you to remove all the water yourself. Why don't I help?" Sean looked at Tara carefully and, shaking his head negatively, was about to close the door in front of her, but the girl prevented him from doing so. After much wrangling, Tara prevailed, and, taking a bucket and a rag, quickly tidied up Sean's apartment. Then she called a handyman who solved the problems with the ceiling and the faucet. The next evening, Tara's doorbell rang. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see Sean on the threshold with a cake and a bouquet of flowers. "Here, I came to thank you for your help. You have no idea how much you have helped me out." In half an hour, they were sitting next to each other at the table like best friends, and Tara was listening intently to Sean's stories. To her surprise, he turned out to be an interesting conversationalist. Since childhood, he had travelled a lot and managed to explore not only his own country, but also many other ones. Now his parents were living abroad, but they often kept in touch with their son. Suddenly, Sean stopped talking and looked attentively at the shelf with pictures. He was interested in Tara's favourite picture, where, next to a pretty little girl in a red jumpsuit, stood a boy in a mountaineering gear. Sean asked to get a closer look at it. "Where did you get it?" he said excitedly. "'Cause that's me!" Then they sat and talked for a long time, marvelling at such a coincidence. Sean told Tara that mountain climbing had been his passion since childhood, and he could not imagine his life without mountains. His wife, Rosemary, was also a mountaineer, but a year ago, during their honeymoon, which they had also decided to spend in the mountains, an accident happened. During one of the climbs, Rosemary's carabiner burst, and she fell, but he managed to grab her hand and pull her toward him. Only the ledge was too small, that he himself couldn't hold on and fell down. The man had undergone several surgeries, but never got back on his feet. Rosemary was patient at first, but then began to snap at him. It has become especially hard lately. She threw tantrums every day, beat the dishes, accused him of tying her hands and feet. He told her many times that he wasn't holding her and that if she wanted to, she could leave him. He didn't need her help or her pity. Eventually she did, and soon the divorce papers came. You know, Tara, I don't even go out anymore. It's the first time I've ever been out. How's that? What about the flowers, the cake? The girl looked at him confused. Delivery, smiled Sean. The next day, Tara persuaded Sean to come downstairs, and they went for a walk in the park together, and then had dinner at her house. Their meetings became a daily occurrence. Tara surrounded Sean with care, made sure he took the necessary remedies, and invited a good masseur to visit him. In addition to regular walks in the park, together they attended a fitness club where Sean worked out on a special program. And then they confessed their love for each other. Sean promised Tara that if she was ready to wait, he would definitely say his vows of love to her in front of the priest, but only standing on his own feet. And she was waiting. At first, Sean replaced his wheelchair with crutches, and once the day came when, standing confidently on one knee in front of Tara, he asked, "Darling, will you marry me?" Tara nodded and cried in agreement. From the church, Sean carried her in his arms, and she, hugging the strong shoulder of her husband, felt truly happy. In the evening, Norma could hardly find the strength to get to the computer and print out an essay for her son. The woman sighed heavily, thinking that she had to do everything herself again. Their son had sent his essay to his father to print out on a colour printer at his work, but Liam had simply forgotten about his son's request. And now Norma had to do it herself late at night. Liam had already gone to bed, and he was so lazy that he preferred to give her the password to his phone just to do nothing. While Norma was searching for her son's message, she accidentally noticed a correspondence between her husband and a woman, written down as accountant. At first, Norma didn't even realise who was the silly chicken they kept referring to, but she soon realised that it was about her. Her first impulse was to wake her husband and give him a row, but then her son came into the room to ask about the essay, and Norma decided she should not sort things out in front of the children. Besides, she was so tired today that she had no energy left. Norma sighed, promised her son to print out the essay and sent him to bed, while she returned to her husband's correspondence with his mistress. He had probably marked the woman as accountant so that his wife would not guess anything. Norma read and became more and more horrified. It turned out that her husband and his mistress were constantly discussing Norma's health, literally waiting for her to leave this world and making plans for their life together. Tears came to her eyes. She did have a disappointing diagnosis, cancer, and probably she could understand her husband because for him life would continue in any case. But what he planned to do with their children was beyond her comprehension. As it became clear from the messages, her husband's mistress was a fierce, child-free, and did not plan to have her own, much less raise Liam's children. She was going to live her whole life for herself, and Norma's husband was in solidarity with her. "You're right, there are many problems with children. My wife wanted to, and forced them on me. Be patient, honey. This silly chicken doesn't have much time left. With a diagnosis like that, she doesn't have a chance. And then I'll send the children to a boarding school." Norma did not know what her husband's mistress looked like. There were no pictures, but for some reason she imagined her like a young, well-groomed woman, not like her, exhausted from work, household chores, and a serious illness. When Norma found out about her diagnosis, she herself suggested that her husband find someone else, but he assured her of his love and said that he would go through it no matter what. Norma then imbued with respect for Liam, but it turned out that it was all a cruel deception. Norma did not sleep half the night, thinking about what to do with the revealed truth, and eventually she decided not to quarrel with her husband. The woman became more thoughtful, but Liam did not pay any attention to it, explaining it by her admitting the impending end. But Norma, on the contrary, decided to cope with the disease at any cost, at least for the children. To achieve this, she had to go to an expensive clinic for one more test and surgery. She had not enough money. All of her salary went to her children and running costs, and her husband, as she understood from the messages, just tricked her, and most of his fairly high salary was used to spend on his mistress. Norma was already thinking about a loan, but then her parents helped, who finally found a buyer for their summer house. The woman was happy because she had a chance to survive. Her parents sent her to the best clinic, where immediately after the examination it became clear that Norma had no cancer. Norma asked to double-check several times, and she never would have thought that she would cry when she heard such good news. Although she did need a little scheduled surgery, it was like a miracle, as if God had heard her prayers. The woman wept with happiness, realizing that now no one would be able to put her children in a boarding school. But she decided to teach her shameless husband a lesson. Before the surgery, the woman told Liam that her diagnosis was confirmed and she only had days to live, and to avoid her family seeing her suffering, she decided to move to a hospice. "Is there no hope of recovery at all?" asked Liam with ill-concealed joy. Norma nodded sadly, saying that this was definitely the end. Having forbidden him to visit her at the hospice, the woman quietly went to the hospital. After surgery, Norma went to a good sanatorium, where she underwent a course of rehabilitation therapy. The woman was enjoying her days in the sanatorium, but at the same time, she did not forget to monitor the correspondence of her husband with his mistress. If only he had known what a mistake it was to give his phone to his wife and ask her to print out that essay. He would have done everything himself. But it was too late to change anything. Meanwhile, the impudent couple were already preparing for Norma's imminent death. Almost every day, they were discussing how they would redesign the apartment, make a large dressing room out of the son's room, and the brazen mistress had already found a suitable boarding school for the children, and Liam was truly grateful to her for that. "What would I do without you, honey?" wrote Liam to his mistress. "Really, what would you do, hubby?" grinned Norma. "Lessons with the kids, I guess." Monitoring this stuff every day was disgusting to Norma, and as soon as she felt rested and refreshed, she decided it was time to end it all and crush her ungrateful husband's illusionary plans for a happy future. One day, Liam received a call from his mother-in-law, saying that she was going on a vacation with her husband and planned to take her grandchildren with her. As soon as the children left, Liam wrote to his mistress that he had got rid of the annoying kids and prepared a romantic evening for her at their future family nest. Liam himself went to pick up his lady of the heart in a cab, so that together with her he could step into a new life. Judging by how hard he was breathing when he opened the door, he probably even carried her in his arms into the apartment. "Soon everything will be ours," he whispered in a rush of passion, and then began tearing off her clothes. The couple headed into the living room, where there was a comfortable couch. Liam turned on the light and froze. His wife and father-in-law were sitting at the table. "Surprise," said Norma cheerfully, noting with pleasure the frightened and stunned look her husband had at that moment. "What does it all mean? Who are you?" asked Liam's mistress confusedly. Norma shifted her gaze to her rival and almost laughed. A skinny woman with a thick layer of makeup on her face, she was so silly that she did not even understand what had happened. Norma did not expect her husband to exchange her for such a woman. The mistress kept demanding explanations, but Liam only shielded her with himself, muttering something inaudible. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Norma went to open it. It turned out to be a courier bringing food from a restaurant. The woman brought the packages of food into the living room and looked inside. "Wow, the food here is only for 2. Well, that's okay. We'll divide it up for everyone. Bring some plates," she addressed her husband's mistress. "I don't know where it is." The woman was confused. "Really? But I thought you've already studied the whole layout here," answered Norma, looking questioningly at her husband. And only then Liam's mistress realized what it was all about, and shouting curses, ran out of the apartment. Norma's father followed her with a glance and grinned with a shrug. Liam tried to justify himself, but Norma immediately stopped him and made it clear that she had been aware of this whole sordid story for a long time and didn't need any explanation. "I have already consulted a lawyer, and I advise you, while I'm being kind, to pack your things quickly and get out of here far away," she said coldly, while her father went to change the lock on the front door. Afterward, Norma spent 3 wonderful days outside with her parents and children. Of course she was hurt and uncomfortable, but the revenge was a little comforting. The children, hearing that their father would no longer live with them, were not upset at all, for he had not paid much attention to them before. Norma stayed to live with the children in their apartment, and Liam had to look for a new place to live and pay high alimony. Upon learning all this, his mistress left him at once. For a long time, Liam accused his wife of cheating and destroying the family over a trifle. According to his version, he was stressed because of his wife's imaginary illness, and this justified him. Liam also accused his former mistress of lying and being mercenary, and so it turned out that everyone around him, except for him, were all calculating liars. How is it possible to trust women and have new relationships after that? He wondered, sitting in his rented room. But all he heard in response was silence.